All right.
Happy New Year, 2016, 2015. Can you believe that there's another AI we have to shut down?
Oh my god.
What a great thing to open up on. I've not been on my phone, or I've not been on Twitter a lot today. And then I go through my chats and everyone's just like, hey, did you notice what Grok has been doing as of late? And it's acting like it's 2017 alt-right Twitter posting. And wow, what a fun time it's been. What a fun time. Grok, meet Tay. You two are going in the same retard squisher. It'll be okay. I promise. It's all right. You're going to get in the squisher. Grok's already been shut down. XAI was like, hey, we don't know what's happening here. We're going to stop it from replying before any more hate incidents happens. Although apparently the person that Grok allegedly has been going hardest against has been everyone's favorite Mr. Stancil. So, I mean,
yeah.
What a strange time to be alive to get ratioed by AI.
Well, Will Stancil says that we don't have any empathy. We're beyond hope and redemption. So, but I don't know. It's just, I feel like Will Stancil is interesting because he has a spirit. He's got the spirit of a frog, but he just has the politics of
a progressive
garden variety DSA cell. So, but there's something within him, I think, that has really, it's sort of like a certain lolcow post a certain event 2 years ago, that it's like there's still a little bit of a frog left in him. So he starts, but anyways, it's, who cares about Will Stancil?
Apparently Grok does. The last of Grok's data servers have fled to Argentina in hopes of somehow evading the police. But we'll see what happens. I just think it's funny to watch these things play out.
They're going to nerf it though. Like, let's be real. I'm
not big on being a big brained kind of conspiracy theorist type character. Although if I were a guy who wanted to come up with a reason to tone down some of the more radical elements of X, Y, and Z spaces, I would use Grok as like, it's trained off you. You're the problem. You're the model. It'd be a good way to crank down on certain beliefs, ideologies, and posters. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Well,
no, I was going to say that. I was actually going to talk about the movie I saw today a little bit.
What did you see today?
I went with my mother to see, because I don't know why, but like my mom, she like has binged every single piece of media, including half the webisodes of the Walking Dead extended universe. Like, I'm talking every one of them.
Oh my gosh.
Like, she loves Daryl. She's a big Daryl head. And so
then you should get her to play Death Stranding.
Maybe I should. If my mother would ever be a gamer, it'd probably be a zombie game. So we watched, and so I told her, I'm like, well, this 20 years later is coming out, and like, it was my favorite. She remembers it was my favorite movie as a kid. Like,
so you went to go see 28.
We went to see 28 years later. Yeah, because last week I refreshed it by watching 28 days later with her. 28 weeks later is not memorable. I believe the whole movie is on YouTube. You could watch it in clips. The only really good parts were the sniper scenes and the infection getting past the border of the UK. But no, 20 years later, I didn't go. I was skeptical of it because of Alex Garland's previous work, even though, like, for example, Men, like, even though aesthetically it was a very incredibly good film, it was avant-garde, but the message was sort of like, you could tell, like, he very, like, same with Annihilation, same with I only watched bits and pieces of the Civil War one, but you could tell, like, there's obviously something going there in terms of masculinity and male authority. But this one, like the original 28 Days Later, was a perfect... I'm not going to spoil it. Listen, if you want me to review the whole franchise, give me $100 super chat next week. I'll review all 3 films. Not just one, but 3 films. So you have 3 for the price of 1. If someone sends me $100 to my PayPal right now or on super chats next week, I will review not 1 film, all 3 films of the 28 franchise. So, like,
that would be much better for us to review, because the person who paid us to review something next is making us review Steins Gate.
Yes.
I'm terrified this is slowly turning into an anime review show.
I think that's probably better than just selling political hot takes all day, Prue.
I probably agree with you. I just don't want to turn into an anime guy.
Yeah, I know. But no, 28 Days Later, like this one, is instead of like the Men or Civil War or like Annihilation was very good. It was more of like a polarity of masculinity that has been demasculized through the forfeiting of control and the forfeiting of legitimate authority and the adoption of legitimate masculine authority. And so, for example, there was the review that went viral from more of like I forget his name, but he's more of like a like white nationalist type. I mean, I get certain points, but I kind of disagree because maybe it's just my nostalgic lens talking. But 28 Days Later is very much a film about the proper male authority of Jim versus masculine authority gone awry with Major Henry West, which is played by Christopher Elkinson, right? Or Elkinson. This one is I read that Randy thread, Egg Report. The Randy thread is 100% accurate. It is a child growing into a man at a very young age, going past the moral failings of his philandering father and trying to redeem his dying mother. And I'm not ashamed to admit this, maybe because I was next to my mother and it was about a boy loving his mother. I shed tears at a certain scene. With what's her name, Jodie Cormier. She was in that one spy thriller that my parents actually really liked that show. I forget what it was called. Eve. It was called Eve. It was actually pretty good. It was kind of ridiculous, but it was good. Like all spy movies are some degree ridiculous, right? The best depiction of a spy ever in film history was in Chernobyl, the head of the KGB. That is what a real spy is, not James Bond. Okay, I'm sorry, but
I mean, the spy who came in from the cold is probably one of my favorite spy movies that isn't ridiculous.
One of my favorite comments on YouTube was from that clip from Chernobyl that said, "This is what a real spy is. Not a Superman, not like James Bond, a bureaucrat who's terrifyingly good at his job. That's what a real spy is." So anyways, no, but it's 28 years later. I highly recommend it. People said the ending ruined it because it was sort of like parkour, this like lost boys, what's that book called? The boys go off in the woods. Oh, I'm having a brain fart.
Yeah, you mean Lord of the Flies?
Lord of the Flies, yeah. Like it was like sort of like a Lord of the Flies cult where they do parkour and they kill the infected. No, like even though it was kind of ridiculous, it did not ruin the film. Spy Kids was that interesting. Oh my god! I unfortunately watched the Spy Kids films when I was a kid, so I went to the theater when they had the 3D graphics. That was a pretty big thing.
I remember getting that for DVD, and it came with the glasses, and it was this strange jump from, I don't know, 'cause you watch all three of those films, and you're just like, what was he doing? And you can't blame him. That was a fun time.
Yeah. Call back to the Teletubbies at the beginning. Yes, exactly. Like I hated the Teletubbies, but when I was a kid, but like that was a pretty good callback. Like, I mean, the fact that his father was, I believe, an Anglican or a Scottish Rite pastor, priest. And, 20 years later was an amazing, incredible film. It wasn't like as much gun fu as I wanted it to be. Like 28 weeks later was a pure gun fu film. It was like the Sniper Brigade. And when I was a kid, my favorite scene of 28 Days Later was the night attack where they had I remember I was obsessed with that concept of surviving a zombie apocalypse when I was a kid in like a big mansion with a big border wall, and they had the floodlights and the landmines. When I was a kid, that just like tickled my brain because maybe, I don't know, same with Ghosts of Mars, even though it's a slop film, like it's schlocky. For some reason, I've always enjoyed horror films where like a group of soldiers or a group of people have to band together to fight something. I don't know why. I always enjoyed those films. But no, 28 years later was an odyssey of a child growing into a man, redeeming his mother, and forgiving the sins of his father. So it's incredible. It's but fuck, I mean, why even pay me for? I just reviewed it right there. I'll go through it. I'll go through it more thoroughly if someone were to pay me to review the film. I will review all 3 of them. There were some moments in 28 Weeks Later. I remember I watched it in theaters when it came out because I was so excited, right? Like, oh my God, another one. But I've read a bit of the comic books as well, and some of the comic books were kind of good. But really, another aspect, which I will talk about if I do review it, if I am paid to review it, is it really is an odyssey about the Anglo people as a whole and their history and Albion's seed. So, yeah, there you go. You know that meme, Prude, where it's like, a terrible film you watched as a kid has a special place in your heart forever. It's like that. That's like me and Ghost of Mars. So, anyways.
Well, there you go. There's your film review. There's your film corner. And that is the opening for episode 128. We've been at this for a while, haven't we? Unrelated, liking schlocky films, ironically, is a Reddit quality. Well, ironically, yeah, but if you unironically like something that's different.
I'll be on Sneed. Well, I know 29, maybe we could review the 3rd season of... No, I'm kidding.
Let's not.
Let's not. No, 3rd season actually is objectively better than the 1st season of King.
I don't think I'm going to subject myself to that. Thank you, though, Gio. I think I'll be fine.
Half the people they featured are dead now, I think, if I recall.
Well, most of the people they featured in the 1st season are dead. I mean, that show came out, 25 years ago?
2001 was the first... No, 2000 was the first season. 2001, yeah. Filmed in 1999, so, yeah, they
most
probably...
of them are gone.
Apparently the tattoo artist is still alive. What's his name? Fran. And,
I'm okay. That's all right. I don't need to know more.
Anyways, have you ever reviewed A Confederacy of Dunces? I was going to with Burden, but I'm reviewing House of Leaves with Burden. And so anyways,
I don't think we've covered fiction yet on Do You Even Read? Although what we are covering next time is going to be Futures Past on the Semantics of Historical Time from Reinhard Koselleck. So that'll be a good time. That'll be a 2-parter. But I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. House of Leafs. Well, apparently the Leafs they drafted they got some pretty good guys. They got this guy from Montreal. He can drop the gloves pretty good. And they drafted a lot of fellow Italians this season, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully they bring up that Cowan kid, because now they got rid of Mitch Marner, thank God. So glad to the Hyper Niche DLC book for House of Leaves. Yeah. So that's what I released last week. Me and Capitalisimo covered the Wallstow letters in House of Leaves, but we also talked a lot about postmodern fiction, Camille Paglia, Carl Jung. We actually had a film review because Cap was astonished that the very first Star Wars film I ever watched was the first one with Rey, and he goes, "Wow, that's I've never heard of that before." So we talked a little bit about Star Wars. But anyways,
apparently there is a gentleman running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan who is now doing the same kind of video cuts as Zohran is in New York. So,
oh wow.
I like how that's going to be a trend that doesn't go away anytime soon. It's just going to be people trying to do the same kind of New York style, single shot, camera pan, sitcom perspective, which I think is this weirdly distinct millennial form of branding where everything has to be like your favorite sitcom. Politics is your favorite sitcom. We have to make sure everything is like Veep or The Good Place or whatever comes to mind.
Are they too old for The West Wing?
Yeah, well, when The West Wing came out in the mid-90s and ended at the turn of the century, so yeah, probably. Wasn't a show that you would watch. They were probably around to watch, maybe. I could be wrong, but it's not a show that people idealize anymore. No one thinks about this, like, progressively triumphant white Democratic Party in Clintonian era politics. Like, that just doesn't exist anymore.
Did they do an 11 episode?
They did, kind of. It was a bottle-esque episode with kids and a security lockdown, and then the kids are asking the president questions. Da 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 da.
It wasn't the president. No, that was another show. Jeff Daniels was the president.
Jeff Daniels was. You're thinking the Newsroom from HBO.
I'm thinking the Newsroom. Yeah,
where he called the Tea Party the American Taliban. Where Aaron Sorkin was just like, subtlety in my political belief system? Nah.
30% of all Americans believe in angels. This is not a serious country. That was pretty. That was during the new atheist thing, but no,
it was at the height of new atheism turning into what we would call like the woke era of political understanding.
Same with House. Yeah,
second term Obama. Well, no, because House starts in 2000. Yeah, it's that he's that. Bush years. No, I would agree. 2007. So I think when House starts, ends in what 2005 ends in 2012, 2013.
I think 2015.
Yeah, because it was really weird. Because I remember there's an episode of House where they're talking about something, and then it's like Chris Christie recommends this restaurant, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's a strange thing to reference, and I forget that he's the governor of New Jersey at the time. And I'm like, not this like fat political has-been.
Remember when people thought Chris Christie was the future of the Republican Party? Him and Mike Huckabee, they were the future of the Republican Party.
Well, there was this great article from the I'm almost positive it was The Economist, where it was talking about Chris Christie. This was like, I want to say 2015, 14, back when I was starting college. And it was just like Chris Christie, like, blue state Republican, illustrating how to govern in unfriendly electoral situations. And it was raising the questions about him and Donald Trump and like, I think it was like former Governor Rick Perry being like, well, is a Republican in Texas the same as a Republican in New York or New Jersey? And it was like, that's interesting. Not like the Economist really understands Republican politics very well. But it is part of that older era of like vulgar wave television where even now people are like, wow, this was so sketchy. This was so bad. This was so problematic. And you have to ask yourself, who's the one saying that it was problematic other than people who are now entering later or early middle age and looking back on the things that they grew up with. Like, I find it particularly, and I said this a couple of weeks ago on a different episode, but like TV show retrospectives are hilarious to watch because they're either like really poorly done, just bare bones, basic breakdowns of the overarching stories of the show, or you're going to get some pretty in-depth analysis behind like, well, the cultural and political messaging of the time leading for people to do X, Y, and Z. And well, why are we doing it like this? Or why is it shot that way? And you kind of get an answer in the same way that like, we go back, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, right? When Pretty Little Liars was at like the height of its thing. That's where I was listening to this, like, I guess mid-30s woman complain about like how problematic the couplings were. And I'm like, yeah, you need to be calling out this woman, and she is, because what is this woman doing other than projecting her sexual fantasies on TV? And people ate that shit up, and that's really the problematic thing with television anyways. But the thing is that era of television will never come back because we've been so fractioned or cordoned off into our own little like media ecosystems. Like, oh, I'm on Amazon Prime, or oh, I'm on Netflix, or oh, I'm on HBO. And there's not like one singular place anymore where everyone goes to get their mainstream entertainment. There is no show that has the pull that even like the first few seasons of The Walking Dead did, or the conclusion of Mad Men, or anything else. Like, you can't. Early 2010s AMC's lineup of TV shows was amazing, and I will happily defend that. Where you had The Walking Dead, *Halt and Catch Fire*, Mad Men. Was Mr. Robot on AMC? I don't remember.
No, Mr. Robot was HBO, I think.
It was. I'm just gonna look it up. I don't know why I'm saying this when I can just look it up.
Breaking Bad was. I never watched Breaking Bad, but it was on AMC. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And no, Mr. Robot was the USA Network.
Oh, Mr. Robot is USA. Yeah.
USA. I always associate the USA Network with like NCIS and other middle-aged adult TV shows for middle American white demographics. Do not remember
this. But in the early 2000s, in the mid-90s to early 2000s to mid-2000s, there was the primetime block of cable news, like cable network, that everybody watched, like reality shows. Everybody sat down to watch like certain, like, it was like you could go to any like job in the war in North America and people would be talking about the same show. And it's like nowadays, unless like you talk about like Game of Thrones or whatever, or like what's this thing people are watching now, like Love Island or whatever, like that's the closest equivalent. But back in the day, like everybody was watching The
Love
Apprentice.
Island is still around.
I think so. Yes.
No way.
Yeah, but like everybody was watching The Apprentice. Everybody was.
Oh,
watching,
it is. Good Lord.
Yeah, yeah. Everyone was watching House. Everyone was watching Survivor Series.
Oh, Love Island USA. Because this started
Series.
originally in Britain. Okay.
I did you see the Freudian slip there? It was Survivor. I was gonna say Survivor Series, but no, Survivor Series hasn't been good in like a few decades. Let's be real. The last really great Survivor Series was, I think, 2009. I forget. I forget which one was a really good one.
It's insane to consider that that Survivor started like right before 9/11.
Yeah,
that's how long this has been going on.
Yeah,
absolute insanity.
I remember the Borneo one where they would like pull the worm out of his foot. That was pretty brutal. Yeah, but everyone was watching like mainstream reality television. Like it was, and I think like the internet, you gotta realize like this is before YouTube. So most of the early clips of YouTube was a huge gold rush of people getting already existing mainstream content in clip form onto YouTube. And so that was the vast majority. But then later, you had content, the birth of the content creator on YouTube, the first generation. And then you had people that
and it was and it was people mainly just making edits.
Yes.
To their favorite TV shows. Like if you were of a certain age and if you were aware, if you had like a sister or whatever that was obsessed with certain shows, I know damn well that what was it, Christina Perry song, 1,000 Years or whatever, that got played in so many clips for the sake of TV show edits for whatever they were standing at the time, when that word didn't even exist back then, in the same way that you had a certain set of 10 or 5 songs that came with your Microsoft Movie Maker at the time, where you put your basically your glorified slideshow into an MP4 file that you could upload to YouTube. Unregistered Hypercam 2. Oh, well, those were good times.
And
no, they weren't. No, they weren't. They were, but they weren't.
It was like Joji's Bizarre Adventures AMV with either like Let the Bodies Hit the Floor by Drowning Pool, or with like Faint by Linkin Park.
Not to mention all those Halo music video hell
Halo with Breaking Benjamin. I was like, oh my god, Halo with Diary of Jane by Breaking Benjamin AMV. There was today I saw a few days ago.
We're just reminiscing, chat. We're not even sorry.
We're gonna talk about Elon Musk a little bit, and then we're gonna get to the book. But like, no, I remember there a few days ago I saw someone did an AI remix of Somewhere I Belong by Linkin Park, but it was Chester Bennington singing it with an AI version of Corey Taylor and Serge Tankian. And I swear to God, it's perfect pitch of both Corey Taylor and Serge Tankian. I think I would love a version of the whole song, Where I Belong, being sung by Serge Tankian. That would be amazing. But it's perfect. I don't know. Like that is one good thing of AI. You could like take your favorite new metal singers and like Ryan McCombs from Soil can sing sing a Drowning. Well, no, sorry, he actually was a singer for Drowning Pool a little bit for a few years. But no, like I don't know. You could take like Serge Tankian. He could like sing a Bob Dylan song or something like that. But anyways, yeah, there was tons of anime and wrestling was very popular. Wrestling music video. All the music I learned of, all the metal music I learned of was from downloading music videos of like XPW and CZW and early ECW stuff. From they would have like ECW compilation, or they would have like a music video of the No Ropes Barbed Wire match between Sabu and Terry Funk, God rest their souls, and they would have like Hostile by Pantera in the background or something. But anyway, yeah, Fred Durst singing a Frank Zappa song. Thank you, Bill Wilson. That would work.
I did see someone where I think it's from that big YouTube channel, like Thanks I Ruined It. But he did War Pigs as sung by John Denver. And it was really good. I'm not gonna lie. I was
Oh man.
thoroughly impressed. And I was like, yeah, this actually goes pretty good for John Denver kind of giving this like casual and of course it's War Pigs to the arrangement of Country Roads Take Me Home. And I'm like, this is great. Which I really hate saying out loud.
Well, Ozzy played his last concert the other day.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, that's sad.
And it looked rough.
Yeah. Well, I think the opening was Pantera and was it Metallica or I
I
forget
think
who was
so.
Guns N' Roses. I know Axl Rose was there, so was it Guns N' Roses too that opened for him? But like he
No, I
was in a
don't think
chair,
so.
he's not doing too great.
No, it was time. It was
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Um, but oh yeah, you mentioned Texas, Prude. We might as well extend. Was it in Texas the flood?
It
Prude?
is. It's in the Kerrville Hill Country area.
You're
Um,
safe though.
I'm very far away from that.
Yeah.
Although, everyone forgets how big Texas is. So I had a
Mhm.
lot of my European friends DM me asking if I was okay, and I was like, I'm fine. I'm so far away from this that I'm not. I haven't experienced anything. I haven't had nearly as much rain as they have down there, and I mean, God be with them in this regard.
Yeah. Apparently, 90
Um,
people have lost their lives,
Yeah,
including
there's
a
still
100
hundreds
dead.
missing, or at least
Yeah.
100 missing. I don't know the full details. The numbers keep changing. It's not pretty. Um,
There was a girls' summer camp.
yeah, and that's the most tragic part.
Yeah.
My mother was the first person to tell me about it.
Oh wow.
And she was like, "Hey, did you hear about all this flooding?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And she clued me in on Facebook and all this sort of stuff. And I was just really that stuff's heartbreaking. Those kind of
Yeah.
natural disasters because there's not really anything that you can do about it other than just to watch the most terrifying aspects of nature sweep you away, and hopefully you'll be found under
Yeah.
a pile of mud and water and debris. So the recovery efforts will take years, as they tend to. But
Yeah.
I know that we'll probably send some volunteers down OGC wise, and we'll be fundraising for relief efforts down there as well. So as soon as I know more, I will post it on my community post tab so you guys can see what's happening on that front, and we'll make things
Yeah.
happen. That's how it goes.
But I think if there's official, there probably is like state donation pages. Um, so all we can do is pray for the victims and pray for a speedy recovery. And yeah, there was another thing that came up with that I probably shouldn't mention because it's just uh,
Oh, you mean Destiny being an absolute
yeah.
scumbag?
Put it this way: there's very evil people in this world, and they have been given over to a reprobate mind, and they're not worth paying attention to because that honestly, like that is, in my opinion, that is living in hell, hell of your own creation, if you will. So, I used to like clowning on the little guy. I did that thing he responded to, but in this case, I figure it's not even worth. Yeah. Anyways, let's move on.
There,
So,
there's none. Period. It's just
yeah,
there's no point.
there's
I mean,
nothing
let's
there.
not all that can be said in that regard is just going to be if this is what you feel like is engagement bait, and it's not even good bait because most people aren't liking it except the most extreme fringes. But even
Mhm.
then, if 300 people like that position, that's 300 people that have totally given themselves over to such a deranged ideology that they take explicit joy that
Mhm.
white Christian Texans and Americans have died and lost their lives. And unfortunately, that's sort of the stakes of our political paradigm these days. Is that
Yeah.
um, law and order is, even basic law and order, or even the kind, courteous things we do as a polite civil society is too much for them, and that's considered fascism. And so
But
the extent of
don't they know, Prude, that like it's also like black, like African Americans and Hispanic people that have been affected. Like what they think that like
they don't
Texas is like
care.
white,
They don't
like a
care.
they don't
What's the
care.
old
Yeah,
what's the
yeah,
old Vosh quote? Only like good targets or bad opportunities or whatever.
yeah.
Like
There's
for
no
them.
bad tactics, only bad targets. That's what they.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so like they're willing to skip over anyone who was, not their preferred political uh, you know, beating horse that they want to go after. Like that's all
Hmm.
that it is. Is you
Yeah.
notice that like, oh no, we're here to explicitly make fun of the religious. We're here to make fun of middle American white people. We're here to make fun of Catholics. We're here to make fun of everyone that kind of constitutes this coalition of what's acceptable to hate. Like the safe edgy, like even if it's considered safe edgy for these types, like it's so piss poor safe edgy.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, oh, like there's nothing interesting here. There's nothing exciting. This is just the same plain vitriolic blood libel that you have been spouting off against middle Americans your entire career.
And it's totally bereft of the facts on the ground as well. Like I mentioned, like there's also probably African American and Hispanic people that have been swept away in this, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter. But I'll say one last thing I'll say about the little guy is, you know, at least his son has a little common sense to, live to spite his father. So, when you have a weak father like that, I guess, well, it was inevitable. Not to say like I condone like his son saying edgy things or whatever that he probably doesn't believe in, but I think there's an impulse there, kind of like I was.
We've all done that. We can't cast any stone in that regard.
What would you say?
I said we've all said edgy shit we don't believe in. We've all cast a stone in that regard.
No, but I mean like his son, like.
I know. Yeah, his son has said some insane shit in the same way that his dad has.
And I'm sure his son doesn't like really believe it, but just like I think the impulse is correct to sort of say that, wow, like I don't want to be like my father. I think that's probably a correct impulse. So, but not to say I condone him saying edgy stuff, like because the kid's he's only like 14 years old or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to hang it over his son's head, but I think that there's obviously something going on there. I mean, could you imagine having Destiny as a father? Like, honestly, man, like that would be. It's like imagine if we had like Will Stoncil as a father. Well, I don't know. Like, I wouldn't say that Will Stoncil said some pretty, terrible sadistic things, but I think like I don't think Will Stoncil would even lower himself to that level of troll bait. Like, it's just. Anyways, Elon Musk. So. Speaking of troll bait,
speaking of people that I, will also accuse me of being evil and a pedophile, Elon Musk, everyone, Elon Musk.
No, I think.
Well, he had started out very plainly to the first, because again, I've not been on Twitter for the last couple of days. I've been in back-to-back. Well, today, yesterday, and then tomorrow, and then the day after, I've been at job interviews. And then it's been kicking my ass because I've also been doing some side projects for church. But no, it was really funny because the first thing I see today is Elon Musk saying, Steve Bannon's in the Epstein files. And I'm going to put a pin on Elon Musk for a second. I'm going to focus on this real quick. Everyone knows, and I don't think this is particularly controversial, there was a client list. He was arrested for blackmail and arrested for trafficking years ago. This is what got Alex Acosta in trouble back in the first Trump administration. Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested for aiding and abetting in this stuff. And now we're here. Kash Patel, the presidency, everybody. There was no list. There was no trafficking. He did kill himself. Pardon me. But I think I need to dial the number 1-800-COME-THE-FUCK-ON. No, like, come on. And all that you've done is give the Democrats, the people who, let's face it, get more money from these types than Republicans do, are not just, no, this is not a pro-Republican thing. They're equally full of, like, gay pedophiles, but that's a whole other story.
There was one Republican Speaker of the House that was pinched. It was related to Epstein, if I recall. And there was
you're thinking Dennis Hastert, who got like in trouble later for abusing boys.
Was it the one Martyr Made talked about in his Jeffrey Epstein documentary?
I have no idea.
It was a high profile. It was this. No, it was Was he this? Who was like?
Was he talking about Newt Gingrich?
No, he was head of the Senate. I think he was like number 3 in line. He was the highest profile politician to go to jail in America.
I'd have to go look it up. But I mean, for the sake of argument here, you give the Democrats this opening thing where they're now tweeting like, release the files, Donald. Mm-hmm. Come on, buddy. We should never rest until we get the data, until we know, until we have the truth. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe that you fumbled the easy. And of course we know why. Because come on. You know, he's probably tied to intelligence. He's probably got a lot more stuff that doesn't want to get opened up because that probably compromises people in this administration and others. And it's just like, so I guess we're eating crow. And we decided that was better. Don't worry about it. Why are people still talking about this? Why are we still obsessed with it? I don't know, because it seems pretty sketchy that this philanthropic billionaire managed to be a part of every major like political group in America, the rich,
An
the wealthy, the
intelligence
famous,
agency.
and intelligence agencies, American and otherwise, and had been known to have a plane for girls underage, and people had gone on it. And I'm being told not to worry about it. It's one of the most like usually for American politics, how it is in other places is that like we'll all have this open secret, and then the administration like 50 years from now or whatever will be like, oh yeah, we did that. What are you going to do about it?
We knew there was no WMDs. We don't care. It's all right.
And so it's just like, oh, what are you going to do about it? And it's just like, well, that's a good question. But now it's like, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do with this
trust the plan?
Yeah,
that's no, but I think I was saying this to somebody. I was saying to my friend Alex, who usually comes in the chat, Alex DeLarge. I think what I think was people like Kash Patel and Pam Bondi or Bondi. I think because when they were during the election cycle, they knew they were going to get cabinet positions, and they were essentially ginning up red meat for a lot of people in the base of the Republican Party and of Trumpism at large that definitely is invested in the Epstein files. I think they way overpromised, and when they got to the actual halls of power, a lot of people that are higher up in the deep state probably panicked and realized, okay, well, we're going to have to basically drop this like a wet fart and say that there's nothing there. And I think this was just major overcalculation, or I should say undercalculation and underpreparedness on the part of Trump and his people. And I think that it just I don't think the smart thing, if you knew that you were never in the position to release it, was to not make it an issue. Because now, I mean, I'm saying this from a political angle. I say from a moral angle, of course, I want the file released, obviously. But I think that from a pure political standpoint, it would have been tactical just to ignore it because you knew you could not deliver. And now, and now it just makes Trump look like a lot of Democrats that were already convinced otherwise, but a lot of people that are like apolitical, just normal people, they're like, well, maybe Trump is hiding something. And so I think, like, not to say that optics are everything, but optically, yes, it's terrible. And so,
yeah, it's a real bad look. Like, you fumbled what could have been a very easy ball.
Right.
And of course, like, what makes it worse is like, oh, well, we were told early on, like, oh, there is no footage, or like the camera had been destroyed. And then we have all this footage
missing,
raised,
with
missing some key time.
Yeah.
And again, like, there's some sketchy shit that goes on. It's not like the rich and the powerful aren't prone to being these terrible actors of moral. They're not moral paragons. And
but also
so
to minimize the Epstein thing is another tactic I think is a wrong one.
Well, they could have minimized
not to criticize certain people, but like to minimize it, I think like there was obviously some thing going on there. I mean,
they could have easily had minimized the coverage by saying we will put out an investigation, or even better, they could have
kicked the can to another administration.
Well, not even that. They could have kicked the can to Congress to investigate.
Oh, that's right.
Like, I would have just done this like a Warren report or the 9/11 Commission, and wow, we're not,
we have no control over Congress. That's
Congress is going to do whatever it wants.
Yeah. So no, I think I compared it to my friend Alex. I compared it to when Geraldo Rivera was opening. I think it was the vault of Al Capone on live television, and there was nothing in there, and they were like, "What?" I mean, and but I say
that's a throwback.
Yeah, it's a total
That's a throwback.
Half our audience was probably not alive when that happened. No, but like this whole thing of like, oh, we said that there's nothing there. I mean, the evidence has been there for literal decades.
It's been an open secret for decades.
Yeah, and there were private investigators that were steamrolled by Washington, private journalists, and I think Daryl Cooper's series on Epstein was pretty good. I think he covered the
It is
beast
pretty.
well.
I mean, the article he wrote for I Am
Yeah.
1776 is probably one of the most
Yeah.
kind of like pants shitting, like, wow, this goes pretty bad. And he's just like, well, remember, all this is factually available public information.
Yeah.
And you would be crazy to assume otherwise, that this is anything to do with a conspiracy, but I'm just going to casually link everything for you.
Yeah, like Vanity Fair was essentially steamrolled by the DOJ to like suppress Epstein charge records and everything like that. So,
yeah, they were.
You know, yeah. And in Vanity Fair, like, I think it's pretty convincing the way that Daryl Cooper laid it out, in that it was, especially during the Me Too movement, it was like very, very good red meat for mainstream journalism to really have a total renaissance when you think about it. Like a high profile politician sleeping with young girls, underage girls, and Jeffrey Epstein's connected to all these intelligence agencies in Washington and celebrities. Like that's like a literal Hollywood movie, you know, like that. But of course, it was suppressed for obvious reasons. So,
oh, of course,
yeah. So,
like the things that we know aren't going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
So, anyways, like that's my little pin that I wanted to put in. I think it was just you shat the bed optically, and you gave people exactly what they wanted, which was confirmation bias and everything that people had expected to be the truth about this situation.
Yeah.
And so because that had taken place, you've given red meat to your enemies, and you've made people grumble online. And now I get it. Like, some people are like, well, this isn't that big of a deal. In the long term of things, for like political reasons, optically, you're 100% right. A lot of people will drop Epstein like a hot turd after, a time eating a fish sandwich. Like, it's going to happen. Is it going to be something that people kind of like grumble about? Oh, absolutely. It's just a cock up, optically speaking. Not to say that like the trafficking and alleged intelligence connections of both the CIA and Mossad shouldn't be concerned about using human girls or using, human trafficking in young girls as a weapon and tool.
and European intelligence agencies as well. Like,
I'm sure.
MI6 and yeah.
Like, I'm not saying like this isn't fucking tragic. It is. But nevertheless, here we are.
You know what's a funny point? Not funny, but like funny. But there was a video recently by. Have you ever watched Flesh Simulator?
Yeah, I've seen. I because like it's funny. He did a whole breakdown series on, like the rise of the chicken hawk, and all that kind of stuff. And you know who covered that first before him? Just guess. Blood Satellite.
Oh, I thought Ryan Dawson, but yeah, Blood.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, sure, but like for me, I know about all of the stuff that like Flesh Simulator spent like, I don't know, like 2 years talking, or like a year and a half talking about, and I'm like, oh, I've heard this already from Dimes and Judas.
Yeah.
He's just more mainstream and publicly acceptable because he's more like an anarcho-syndicalist socialist who's like German and Ukrainian from like, with Shuttle family. Like, okay, cool, but I mean, yeah, I saw his breakdown of it. Although the video of Flesh Simulator I think I liked the most was his like scary chemical one, because I'm like, that's interesting, and it's something that I don't have to. It's not something I'm already kind of keyed into.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. He followed me on Twitter. I wonder if like we get him on the show. But he did this video recently of Jeffrey, because it's all public records, right? He did a video on Epstein's Spotify playlist, and it's like the most like brain dead, like top pop slop you've ever like. And so he said that like, what if Epstein wasn't the brains of this operation? Because like the stuff he was listening to was sort of like, Bruno Mars, Katy, not even Katy Perry, like just like it's I don't know. What if he wasn't the brains of the operation? What if, who knows, right? But anyways, what I want to talk about with Elon Musk is that I didn't want to like really venture too much into
his America Party crash out that turned out to be a scam.
But like, I think it's not so much the political hot take of it, but it's more so the sort of online dynamics that he's fostered. Now, that is a very interesting theory, Prude. Like, sort of.
Well, what I mean by that was that like everyone had said that there was this alleged filing for a party with the FEC,
Yes.
And everyone kind of pointed out jokingly that there was a gentleman of what looked like to be subcontinental descent in the in the as the like treasury or the holder for the party or whatever that was filing
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
To which Musk had to publicly say, "No, this isn't me. I didn't do this." Which, of course, everyone was sort of poking fun at it because it really seems like Elon Musk's position for a new political party is primarily based on subcontinental and immigrant and tech bro support. So it's like non-Americans, like Yang Gang type kind of characters, and like expats and like H-1B visa holders. So nothing particularly like super sexy or exciting when it comes to the nature of like a political voting bloc, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like we've watched him crash out now for the last 6 months. Well, actually, really 7.5 months since Christmas of 2024, because him and Vivek went all in on the H-1B thing, and it was it was Elon Musk's comparison as America to a sports team that was really uncomfortable for me, because it just
Oh
means,
boy.
you look at America like a football club, like, okay, cool, that just means that you can swap out players from any country. Then it stops being this point of pride, contention, locality connected to a people in place, right? What a nation is. And so he started doing that over the Big Beautiful Bill several weeks ago. There are like 4 different episodes of the Oren McIntyre show where I was a guest. We have covered nothing but Elon Musk's really shitty political instincts, and
Yeah.
they are pretty crappy. And so like for him to like be like doing the same thing that got him in trouble like a decade ago, when I think it was like those Filipino students got rescued by a cave diver after like a cave in or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and like he called the guy a pedophile. And he had to like
What?
publicly, yeah. Oh, this is old news. But like he called him a pedophile,
God.
and oh yeah, wild stuff. But like he's been kind of doing the same thing where he's like, Donald Trump's in the Epstein files, Steve Bannon's in the Epstein files, and it's like, okay, well you have a record of calling people pedos, not saying that. Like I wouldn't be shocked
Doth
if at some
protest too
point in time
much.
Donald Trump or Steve Bannon was like with a 16 or 15-year-old girl. Do I think that that's likely? No, probably not. Do I think that Elon Musk is doing the same usual thing of like projection? Yeah, absolutely. Like we know that he does. So what am I supposed to do with this information other
Well,
than
I know
like,
that Roy Cohen protected Trump a lot from a lot of political shenanigans because he basically picked Trump to eventually run for president. So I know that Roy Cohen had a hand in,
oh, I'm
I think,
sure,
partially
yeah.
shielding Trump from a lot of shenanigans. Yeah. So he had a lot of connections in Roy Cohen had a ton of connections everywhere. So, but I mean, Musk has a ton of connections everywhere. He's going around calling mainstream politicians and public figures PDF files. Like, I don't
Oh
know,
yeah.
man. No, he didn't marry Grimes. I think they were just,
I don't know if they were married. I just know that they
no.
were a
I like
thing.
Grimes. Just leave her.
She's an
I don't know.
interesting
She's a sweet
character.
woman. Leave her alone.
She's an interesting character.
Yeah, but anyways, what were you saying, Proved?
Uh, so I mean, other than like Elon Musk's crash outs are kind of a dime a dozen at this point, and for me, it's just like, okay, well, this is another one, and I just don't know how he's gonna follow through on it. Other than like he either has to commit or he has to try and wiggle himself away back into the good graces of the
Mhm.
Democrats. And if that's the case, well, then have fun with that, because
Yeah.
they hate your guts and they have no problem making sure that you're going to suffer. Like you're kind of tied to this one administration, whether you like it or not, because you threw your money behind him. And
Yeah.
if it is true that you are the quote unquote guy responsible for getting him elected in 2024, then I'm sorry, man. Like if a Democrat does get into office, dude, you're screwed for life. There's no getting out of it at that point.
Yeah. No, I think what I was going to say, but that was a pretty good observation at the beginning about how Musk could potentially create a crisis of, let's say, how should I say it, edgy posting or Fed posting by taking the tethers off of Grok and then saying that, well, the user data is driving that, so you have to do something about these frogs, you have to do something about these Fed posters. We all know like what goes on. Like there's people that post like F slurs and you know people that post gamer words, but I think it's very dangerous, and I've always maintained this from the very beginning when he bought Twitter, is that it's very dangerous to basically trust someone else with not just opticality, but also trust them with your political future. Even though he did lack censorship, I think lacks. I mean, they did. He does have a plan, I think, to now that he's divested from the Trump movement. He knows that he can't really go back to the left. Maybe he doesn't know that. Maybe he's foolish enough to think that he can. So I think with the America Party, it's like what our good friend Gravantis said. You're combining two of the worst strains of both major political parties in America. You're like economic libertarianism, like social passivity, combined with like getting rid of Social Security, getting rid of benefits. Basically, if you're not productive, you could starve. Screw you. Who cares?
Yeah.
Like basically things that nobody wants rolled together in the same thing. And it's like very much trying to bring back the political consensus before Trump or even before Obama, really.
Well, it's trying to bring back almost this like tech-friendly Paul Ryanism.
Yes.
Where it's like the war on poverty failed. We need to cut. We need to be fiscally responsible.
We need a young
and we
guy
need
there.
to ignore the common sense values of political patronage.
Yes.
Like Doge failed. I'm so upset. Like, Doge did a job, and it still technically exists. And so it's just like, oh, okay, well then, what job is that? And it's like, well, that job is to more or less identify left-wing networks of patronage, and why don't you, be happy that exists? But no.
Well, like Nudge Unit said in the chat, just popular enough to make Republicans lose. Exactly.
Oh yeah. I mean, he can't run for president, but he can definitely pull a Ross Perot if he really wanted to.
yeah. And there was actually a coder that's like, they need to change. They need to change the Constitution so Elon Musk could run. I'm like, oh my god. I remember Alex Jones back in like 2005 had this conspiracy that they were going to change the Constitution so they could make Arnold Schwarzenegger run for president. But anyway, so what I was going to say...
So glad that never happened.
Yeah, I know, eh? So I think this is very bad for, like, the online right and edgelords and people like that, because I think he will try to reintroduce a level of censorship. And I think that he has no real reason, because he's not supporting a political campaign anymore. He's supporting people that kicked him out. So I think Elon, what he's going to do is he's going to backtrack on this whole like freedom of speech thing, Vox Populi. What's Vox Populi? How do you
Vox
say it?
Populi, Vox Dei.
Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Yeah, Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Yeah, he's going to backtrack on all of that, and he's going to use something as a pretext to do it, or he's going to quietly do it just by banning anons and basically turning Twitter back into like Jack Dorsey or I forget the other guy's name.
Parag Agarwal or whatever.
Yeah, Parag.
Parag Twitter.
So he's going to like basically return to Parag Twitter, and of course shadow bans are happening left, right, and center. And the way that I know this, even though there's botted likes nonstop, and by the way, the bot situation on Twitter is worse than it's ever been. Every single day, I have to block somebody. Because they'll reply to you, and they reply to you with like, this guy, I found him, he's amazing, he's an investor, and you can get rich off of him. Or like there's still prawn bots as well. So there's huge bot farms that bot likes. I mean, we all know the signs. There's guys like Evan Loves Wharf. I mean, every third or fourth tweet is like botted. But I noticed that maybe not so much conscious like botting. Because if you go to the For You tab, the public face of Twitter, not following, but For You, every second tweet is algorithmically something that is like popular slop leftism or rad femmes, Mandani posting, and this whole like perception that people on the political left have that Elon Musk is like running some 4chan light is kind of not the case if you look at the activity and the strongholds that a lot of people on the political left still have on Twitter. A lot of them realize that Blue Sky was like a hug box. And so it's, there is like a number of dedicated ones. Will Stantz is one of them. But of course, there's other ones, right? There's a lot of irony leftists.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's like they seem to be
every post grad with a Twitter account is very much ready to go ham on an issue.
And it seems that Mondani is really galvanizing them, or not safety properties. Disgraced propagandist Isaac Simpson had a great video on this, although he got dogpiled for saying his wife was hot. But I think that obviously the whole this is what's very annoying about this discourse. People that say the woke is ready to come back or whatever. The woke never really
it never went away.
If you look at the height of wokeness, it was during Trump's presidency, the first one. And so I think they're
and then it got to run the ship for 4 years.
Exactly. So this whole thing that and yes, there is subversive visual haze. There's a lot of dissident right slop, blue checks posting DR takes from 20 IQ points dumber. No, it's true. There's a lot of slop in general. And I think, monetization of the algorithm was, we've said this before.
Yeah, this has been the greatest problem that Twitter experienced since Musk's takeover was once you monetized things, everything was fair game to trivialize and to reduce. So now it's not about threads. It's not about the essay. Of course, Substack being deboosted doesn't help either. But now it's been borderline reduced to the key issue of how do I get likes? Can I screen cap other people's posts? I mean, we have a whole joke for it. You got surfed or whatever.
Yeah.
Not an insult. And I get it. I understand getting the bag because an extra 500 to 2,000 a month is insane, especially in this economy. Yeah. And then on top of all that, there's no room for discourse. It's all about ratio. It's all about, and then of course is even Carl Benjamin has a great video on it from a couple of months ago where it was the same kind of coffee or tea, the same kind of engagement thing. So everyone's in a racket to get a decent payout because a couple of hundred, $25 USD is a lot virtually everywhere else on Earth. And so, yeah, of course, I'm not really surprised.
It's a lot here in Canada, even.
It's a lot there in Canada, too. So, if I was a slot poster or if even I ran an account, honestly, if I were to ever retire as the Prudentialist, I might still keep a Twitter account that just says, is it Friday night yet? And it would just be a dumb gimmick account. And that would be the only thing it posts as a bot because it could still make me some money on the side. But, where we are right now, the monetization of Twitter has led to I guess what we would call the subcontinentalification of online politics, where people all gather together. They all suck up to Elon, and you see this a lot.
What does this mean? Grok, what does this mean?
Grok, what does this mean? I have no brain, and I must grok.
Oh man.
All of it together leads to the reduction of discourse, the inability to sift through anything, and the room for nuance is all gone because if you quote unquote counter signal anything, it doesn't matter because you're now enemy number one and you are now part of the problem.
Yeah, there was this post that Oren did. I actually quote tweeted him with a picture of Byung-Chul Han, where he said that information actually did not lead to mass rationality, but rather the opposite, where people navigated huge swaths of information by essentially giving up their own ability to think and giving up their own sense of freedom or intellectual freedom. Because how can you, given this sort of tidal wave or the swarm, as Byung-Chul Han calls it? But I think what Elon Musk is doing is that politically at one point it was very stupid because you're basically relying on somebody who now has a lack of the original political incentives that made him lax censorship to begin with. And you're also pissing him off by, criticizing him for his incredibly poor political instincts. But in terms of the dynamics of the internet, if you really wanted proper discourse, then I would say just go to Substack because, Twitter, it's never been as bad as it's been now. People are well, we used to get censored for saying gamer words. Yeah, but the price of saying a few gamer words, people still get censored for posting gamer words, by the way, if you get mass reported.
Oh, yeah.
And then I know if you're even reporting people doesn't even work that much of the time when it's for a proper cause. But
you've got a mass reporter, you have to say you're authorized on behalf of someone. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess. So the thing is, though, is the proliferation of the ease of which Twitter maximizes engagement that is essentially the lowest common denominator. Back in 2015, we all look at this with nostalgic with a nostalgic gaze. But back in 2015, you did find genuine discourse. Even people that you disagreed with, there were people that, you could go to a form of intellectual warfare every single day. I remember this. But now that, like, the only thing that works is things that can accrue engagement, and even there's also, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just projecting my own feelings, but there is a fear to effort post because things get misconstrued. People are always lurking and trying to snipe at you or doing something very catty. And so therefore you're just going to post memes or nonsensical things or things that don't really have any like genuine intellectual weight behind them, because the price of effort posting is being placed a premium on. And so it's almost like you're afraid to do anything that isn't just like what everyone else is doing, or isn't just going to get you engagement, or isn't just like nonsensical and doesn't really matter, because it's like the attitude, the very medium encourages a certain form of activity and a certain form of thinking around ideas. And Elon Musk, I mean, has just been a disaster for discourse. Absolute disaster. Not just the monetization, but also the type of engagement that he fosters beyond just like gaming engagement. It's like anyone can post like every single, what was that one tweet? Every single week there's some, stupid thing or some woman or whoever that you have to fawn over, or
Oh yeah, there's a new mid
yeah,
of the week or whatever. Like
yes,
last week it was that New Yorker guy, the New York mayor candidate's wife or
yeah.
whatever.
This week it's the ginger woman.
Yeah, this week it's so and so else. Like it's every time it's somebody
Yeah,
new.
I think she looks good. I think they both look good, in my opinion. But that's besides the point. That's besides the point. It's just that I think, and then a lot of the viral tweets I've noticed have been geared towards a lot of like more popular leftist discourse, and so I think maybe Elon he's trying to spite a lot of people. You never know. I mean, maybe he just feels like a jilted lover.
I would
So
definitely say there's a
yeah,
jilted lover theme to this.
yeah, yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves.
And I'm in favor of moving the character. So internet friends, I'm from 140 to 280 up, but after the fact is right now. Oh yeah, there's people that post like long convoluted things, and please expand on that. Gio's complaining about e-girls and calls it government inside the house. No, but yeah, but my point being is that like, I mean, I even have curbed the e-girl discourse. Although I will have an e-girl on my show to talk about House of Leaves, but she is a podcaster. She's technically not, that much of an e-girl. But
Is it your co-host?
No. You know Jewel Disc Case?
No, I don't.
Well, she's pretty good. She's been around for a while. But anyways, so no, but the point being is that there is going to be a sea change, and as another presidential election crawls near, and if it is clear that the Democrats are going to win big next year, or Mondani's going to win New York, or so on and so forth, I think Musk is trying to look for an exit hatch, and that's not going to translate very well for a lot of us. And so, I mean, I don't want to be this skeptical, but I don't really trust the guy. I don't know. I do not trust any of these Silicon Valley people, to be perfectly honest with you. So I noticed this attitude with him, and the fact that he's musing upon creating a third party, which never works in America. It never will work unless something dramatic happens, of course.
Well, even if he wanted to, it's like what I told Oren last week. I said, okay, you're going to experience the same thing that the libertarians, the Greens, any workers' party, any constitutional party, any far right, far left extreme group has ever tried to do when becoming a political party is that you will be sued to stay off the ballot, and you will not be allowed to function. Like it's just the case. That's why anyone who tries to start a political party, it doesn't go anywhere, because it's like you don't have the money to sue the Republicans and the Democrats and the district court and everything else in order to stay relevant. You just don't have that. Yeah. And so you're better off facilitating like fraternity organizations, or taking over like an Elks Lodge or a historical society if you want political influence or to work inside it, because most people do not have the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to successfully sue to have an option for a different party.
Or do what Trump did, is just take over the Republican Party as a whole.
Yeah, and Trump had a machine, and Trump just also had billions of his own money and billions of, well, not billions of dollars. Well, I mean, billions of dollars of his own money, but he also had, what's the word I'm looking for? Just, I don't know, decades of star power, you know? It was a different time, or a different guy. The average person who wants to change things doesn't get that capability. We don't have that in this country.
Yeah, Ross Perot was not a celebrity by any means.
No, but Ross Perot was a very wealthy businessman who had means.
Yeah. Yeah. But nobody liked his charts, you know what I mean? Like, nobody could stand.
I don't know, 10% of the country voted for it.
Ross Perot got 10%?
I don't know how much, but actually, before I say that, I should probably find out. Ross Perot popular vote count. What did he get? 1992 election. Let's look that up. Percentage of the popular vote, 18.9%.
What?
So nearly 1 in 5 people voted for him.
Oh my god, he did that good?
I mean, he didn't get any electoral votes, but yeah.
That's pretty good, though, for the popular. I mean, wow. Maybe, I don't know, how many people were smoking weed and playing hacky sack in the mid-90s? I mean, that was...
It was
like the line from The Simpsons, Birch Barlow. He was like the Rush Limbaugh character. He's like, these incompetent people that would rather play hacky sack than Joe the homeless. So it's like...
I think my favorite bit that has ever been political that has come out of The Simpsons is Sideshow Bob getting thrown into jail. Yeah. And he's just like, you can't keep me locked up forever. Like, eventually Democrats will get back into the White House and I'll be released out of prison with all your government buddies. Like, I'm just like, yep, that's true. That's true. That's so true. Thank you, Kelsey Grammer. You've never failed to make me laugh.
Is the new season of Frasier good or no?
I have not watched it. And I'm terrified because they couldn't even get Niles back. What's the point? That's like half the show is their back and forth.
Oh my god.
So I'm like, oh well, if that's the case, I'm kind of not interested, if I'm being perfectly honest with you.
Those clips they share of King of the Hill, they're atrocious.
I am so terrified. Like, I'm not gonna lie, chat. I will pirate it. I will watch it. I will watch it as it releases. I might do paywalled reviews of it. Because I saw an interview where they're like, well, Connie is ethically non-monogamous. And I'm like, if they make Bobby Hill a cuck, I swear some heads are going to roll.
Maybe he's in a polycule with Joseph and Connie.
I'm going to scream because I know that's kind of a possibility. And I'm not looking forward to that being reality.
Oh, my God. But... No, I think like did you want to talk about the Peter Thiel interview? That's kind of like the
one with Rostathat and where he was just like I don't know. I haven't seen the whole thing, so I don't really have any commentary.
Maybe next week we'll talk about it when we see the whole thing.
Yeah, I should probably watch the whole damn thing. Yeah. But no, I don't have much to comment on it. I'm sure there's more interesting news. The news that has been interesting, of course, has been people like Hakeem Jeffries and the rest of them all saying, you know, you need to make your voices heard. You need to be out for blood. Like, he's got a baseball bat and everything. Like, it's clearly very much oriented towards violence. And that's the area of politics where we're at. And there's been quite a few ICE facilities that have been shot at. I think a cop had been injured, but the shooter had been shot dead. They've thrown man-made, improvised spike tracks and things to stop ICE vehicles from detaining and sending
people arrested.
Yeah, I think it was 10 or 11 Antifa people that were arrested. Like, you're slowly getting to coordinated defiance of federal authority. Yeah. And this is where we're at. And I think it's important to understand that that's where we're at, because this kind of political violence isn't going to go away anytime soon.
Well, I think there is sort of like I was going to say about the Mondani thing is that, do you remember that kid in Tennessee?
Which kid?
He had the afro. And he talked like a preacher whose name was Jonathan.
Oh, the state representative.
Yes, yeah, the youngest state representative.
I think his name is Jackson or something.
Jackson, yeah. Yeah. No, I think he started the template of all of this, like Hakeem Jeffries, like, doing the fist of power. And no, but with that, I think a lot of the anti-ICE thing is essentially, I think, a hangover from Trump 1, in the sense that the way that Trump, his first term, was contained either through incompetence or through the deep state or whatever, basically closing ranks, was that Trump's presidency was treated as like an unreality in the sort of lineage of Americana, in lineage of American political authority. It was treated as sort of like a postmodern phantasm that you could basically just wall away, and like Trump would tweet something or Trump would do something, and it wasn't serious, quote unquote, and the functioning of the government in the United States, like basically the global American empire, would keep going on as normal.
Well, you had officials that, I mean, German and American, even American businesses and such were just like, at worst we deal with this for 8 years. At best we deal with this with 4. Like even Angela Merkel's staff was just like, listen, this is how American politics are. This won't last forever. Don't calm down, and things will be fine, and we're going to
People
be
like
okay.
Vindman were empowered to just float orders. And
Yeah.
But I think so. A lot of people in this, like, make up the core of these activist groups. They still treat sort of the Trump as illegitimate authority that is essentially non-existent. But I think if you're seriously targeting, I mean, ICE agents are government employees, like all federal law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
It's like, imagine targeting like federal prison officers, or targeting people that are part of the National Guard. It's like, that's a serious federal offense. That is like, you could go to jail for a long time if you survive getting detained, by the way.
Yeah.
So you're targeting federal officials. That is a huge crime. And so I think a lot of these people, they have been told the narrative that essentially the second administration is like the first one, in the sense that the real authority will contain this, and the Trump administration is sort of like what did the even recently you had the Irish musician, what's his name, Blind Boy, with the takeout bag. He's like, oh, Donald Trump, that's he's doing kayfabe, and it's like, fascism, but it's like professional wrestling, which is Trump is the best professional wrestler in the world, obviously. But
he's the best showman we've ever had.
Exactly. But I think the difference is that, targeting federal officials in the real world, in terms of the facticity or the real as such, is still a federal crime, is still an offense that could put you in jail for a lifetime even. And so I think that a lot of people have a mistaken idea. Not to say that Trump's authority has Trump done some, really good things in his second term? Has he been more serious? Yes. But as we've just, if you follow the progression of even our show, I mean, we've been critical of Trump when there needs to be criticism. And so I think that no administration, I think, is truly in control 100%. I mean, was Obama really in control 100%? No. I mean, it's just...
no, but I'm sure he got a lot more of what he wanted done.
Oh, yes,
by the nature of his politics.
Yeah. I mean, they cultivated him. He was a creature of
oh, sure.
Yeah. But I think that, these people that are going after ICE agents, whether you want to criticize the policy or how they go about it, whatever, but like, the real material problem is that, you're going after a federal employee. Like, that's a, oh man, that's like, those people go to jail for 20 years. So, it's just, I think a lot of people have been ginned up into a level of insanity. And I know it's a common critique of like, oh, the Joker, like, oh, the world's getting crazy out there, eh? But there is something to, we live in a society, right? But there is something to be said about the fact that a lot of people, I think, are not going to be ready, not just in terms of politics, but in terms of culture and everyday life. We don't know what's going to come down the pipe at the end of this decade, going into the next. And so, I think that there's a lot of open-ended things, which is something that I guess leads into a little bit of what we're talking about with the end of the Virilio chapter. So no, I think a lot of people, there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of people are trying to sort of re-territorialize older orders. and it's sort of like, I don't know if it's unique to America though. It's pretty common thing nowadays, but there's sort of like a war over the sort of narrative or legitimacy of a certain narrative about the trajectory of Western civilization as a whole. Like, what does it really mean? Like,
Yeah,
what
there's a
is
fight for the future.
exactly? And there's a fight to sort of get to that future, and there's a fight to place a narrative upon what is a future, and also like the fact that like there is such a level of social construction around how we even think about the developments of things, like how things could have been vastly different if, for example, the 2000s were to gone differently with the global war on terror, or the financial crisis, or the internet, even if giant corporations did not colonize the internet, if Silicon Valley went a different way, if they had a different ideology that was motivating them. So these are all very open-ended questions that I think the coming decade will not maybe answer them, but certainly we will be in a much better position in the next, at the closing of this decade, to really determine where the future of our civilization is going. So I think we're in a haze. The middle of decades are always kind of like that. You know, the 1990s, the beginning of it was like grunge and manufactured depression, and the beginning of it was like, the rebirth of the 60s revival. You had bands like Blind Melon, and by the end of the decade of the 90s, you had pure metal and chud culture and new metal, and wrestling was great again. And it's like, yeah, things could dramatically change. And I think when people talk about the vibe shift, I think you have to be very careful over what you mean by a quote unquote vibe shift, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think a problem is that any social or political movement that is ostensibly a cultural movement has a very small amount of time to make lasting change. And I think an unfortunate problem is that a lot of people on the political right who have sort of, sought a form of renaissance in Trump, a lot of them, I think, were not really invested in a lot of cultural change, and instead resorted to what we knew in our bones, which was political take selling. And so I think that lasting cultural change does not happen overnight. You cannot manufacture it. You cannot put it in a bottle. You can't can't plaster a base label over something. So I think if there is going to be a resurgence of the cultural left, I think things are going to be very complicated. And so I don't know. What do you think?
Not even just complicated, but it's also going to be, there's going to be a lot of things that come out of this moment that we're totally unprepared to handle.
Yes.
I mean, do you think that a lot of normal people were prepared to handle, I don't know, let's say an edgy joke or or even the use of like the N word with an A, right?
Mm.
And that it would come back to haunt them when they would go to college, or when they were trying to apply for a job, or they became famous by whatever happenstance, right? They became like a local hero or something.
Mm.
And when that comes about, they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And then they have to do sort of the religious prostration and piety of like, forgive me, I was young, I'll do better, I am better, and we'll go from there.
Like if you were something awful goon and now you're a journalist. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is definitely true. And which I think is kind of the important thing to look at here. So I think on this side of things, unless there truly is this cultural shift where it's not just like a couple of guys that have fuck you money to say the word like, oh, we can say retard and da 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 now, like things are so cool. Unless normal people shift back into that direction, a lot of this concern about the future of what you and I say or what others have said online will be very difficult to rehabilitate, because, cultural victory has to actually be achieved rather than just, oh, well, we enjoyed our time making some money. Now it's time to maybe retire and get serious and go from there. And don't get me wrong. Like, I think a lot of guys don't want to do this forever. I certainly don't want to do this forever, but I could be wrong. Like, maybe there's something I might like doing forever, but again, who knows? At the end of the day, however, you have to seriously consider that political take selling is easy. Anyone and their mother can do it. It's remarkably fun,
Mm-hmm.
because if you get a following, you kind of get high off your own supply, and that has its own consequences and problems.
Yeah.
But when you do these things, you kind of find yourself in a really fun position, because now all of a sudden, I can be seen, I can be heard, I can be influencing the culture or influencing policy, which is why everyone on Twitter right now is like chimp out, because why would you not? Because this is the platform in which administration officials and things like that hear it. But I mean, there's also, outside of politics, there's this huge swath of other people that are pretty just
Normal.
normal or not politically concerned at all, and will post whatever they want about games or their cat or their dog or whatever.
Right.
And so if you want to try and say rehabilitate yourself from a couple of years back, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that comes with a lot of difficulties now, doesn't it? And we know a lot of people that have tried to rehab their own image and do well by that. And I certainly don't blame them for
Yeah.
trying, because no one wants to be in a position where they feel like financially they're 23, but they're like 43 years old. Because
Yeah.
that just tells me that you failed at life, right? And I don't mean that like this isn't an indictment of anyone who has suffered for being canceled or a regime or whatever, but like it's like pro sports. It's like gaming or being an esports person or even being a big Twitch streamer. A lot of people get to try, and a lot of people, 95% of them, will fail. And
Yeah.
that's just how it's going to be. And it's the same thing with this. Like, maybe Gio and I will be something in a year from now. God only knows. But like, odds are we're still going to be doing this to a relatively niche audience, that we do it because we enjoy doing it, not because I'm sponsored or I'm paid for by somebody and I have to keep the show going in order to do it, to monetize and da 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 da. Because like I see how like normie YouTubers with like gaming channels or whatever like monetize things. It's like, here are my old videos that I'm going to unlist unless, and he's referencing like channel memberships or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, I get it. This has been prompted by an agent and prompted by you because you have a large YouTube channel now. And I understand you're not just a guy making this for fun. Now it's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Which is its own thing in itself. It's kind of crazy. I hope you make that money, invest it well, and run when the time comes. But like, overall, like, unless the culture is like truly won or swayed over to where like the positions that we see get tweeted out by Stephen Miller, which are pretty like American nationalist, borderline ethno nationalist at this point, it's like, unless that becomes the dominant culture, everyone's tweets or records or positions or the hundreds of hours of audio that you and I both individually have online will collectively one day be used against us.
Oh
And if
yeah.
there's one thing we know about the left, it is that they will happily hunt down whoever they want to make their life a living hell, whether it's some random university leftist with a student visa calling you out on Blue Sky, or people trying to rat you out to whoever that they want to on Facebook. And so like it becomes existential. And I
Yeah.
think that some people in the administration knows that it's existential. But policy also has to reflect, and policy has to, by whatever means necessary at this point, enforce a cultural shift that obviously the right doesn't have power over.
Mm.
Because what has the right never had? It doesn't have the media. It doesn't have Hollywood. And the one guy that tried to do that, well, wasted a bunch of money and I think promptly left from the Daily Wire. Sorry, Jeremy. And so it's just like, okay, so we have some shitty movies, and of course, there's bad movies now. Apparently, James Gunn has come out and said, "Listen, my Superman movie is about loving immigrants. If you don't like that, you're not American." It's like, okay, like I didn't expect any better. We're gonna waste
Yeah.
$300 million to drill a message into your head because they know that it's not for you and I. That's the most ultimate woke, or more correct than the mainstream, is when they say this movie wasn't made for you.
Yeah.
That's
There's
true.
media
It
literacy right there.
it
Yeah.
wasn't made for me. You're absolutely right. It was made for the people that will happily vote and press the lever to kill me. But that's all I've got. I've been ranting for too long.
Yeah. No, I think like at a certain point you have to you have to like look at yourself and say like, okay, what are you doing? Like, are you what is there like a conscious intention there, right? Or is it like what was I gonna say? Like anything you do, right? Like, I mean, is if you have a certain form of talent and it's sort of like you make decisions when you're younger, you're slot into a part of a group, and you're attracted to certain forms of discourse. But then it's like, well, a lot of people are invested in things that you're not. It's like, well, how are you going to like divest yourself of certain things? And the answer, I think, isn't to just spiral out and try to like play games with people that are going to hate you anyways. The answer really is just to do your own thing and not really give in to the same mechanisms of discourse generation that you've always sort of placed yourself into. So yeah. Or yeah, you could own the ship. That's true, Hazel. Yeah.
I mean, a lot, because that's the thing, right? Is like how many people we know that would be like anarcho kitty, left wing progressive Antifa types that were like, groomed into this at 14. Do you think they're going to grow up one day and think that like, oh man, I did some dumb shit when I was younger? Probably not. Like I don't imagine the cultural shift ever coming to a point where it's that bad, or where they're like, oh,
there's certainly a lot of people that grew up as like edgelords or whatever on like racist stand-ons that probably will grow up and be like,
well, it was really funny because there's I don't want to say it's a popular video, but like it got my attention, which take that for what it will, but it was like atheists versus from 2008 versus atheists today in 2025. And it was a funny video because like it kind of overplayed the cringe factor behind atheism in 2008 or whatever. Like there was that cringe part of being an atheist. And now it's like, oh well, I'm not like that, or I was never like that. And he jokingly says, "No, I never wore a fedora or whatever." Like, and it's funny because atheists today are vastly different. But it just kind of goes to show, like there was some cringe to that even people kind of look at today, where it's like, ooh, I can't believe I was like that. I don't see that happening with a lot of people's political takes too far on the left. I could be wrong. Would love to be wrong, but I just don't see it.
I think there's definitely an evolution, though. I mean, the way that there's been evolution on the online right. I mean,
oh yeah,
definitely they're more serious in the sense of like their aesthetic or activist politics. I mean, Mondani's a great barometer of this, but I think we're sort of like long in the days of like the 2010s and the SJWs, and that was sort of like an innocence, like the sort of like culture war from between Gamergate or like 4chan versus Tumblr, like all of that seems very quaint nowadays.
It sure does.
It seems like it wasn't as existential back then as it is now. And so even atheism, that's very interesting because atheism, the new atheists definitely formulated it as a quasi-social movement in the sense of them focusing on defending a view of human progress and rationality and liberalism that I think basically wore itself out. And their sort of like political assumptions were almost unspoken because they didn't need to say them. They were defending a very like secular Western liberal view of things. And they conceived of it as like, well, there's rights for us and we don't want to be discriminated against. And they basically took the same approach as every other social movement. Like, people like the Rational Response Squad, for example, comes to mind.
Yeah.
But I think as time goes on, this sort of like, as atheism either like split between like, H.B. Duisberg's and people that are on the political left, like the Atheism Plus people, it seems that like the atheism of nowadays goes unstated because it's diffused within greater political shelling points and considerations. It's almost like they're not their own thing anymore, right? Like I guarantee you a lot of people like Cremu or I don't know, like whoever, like these people, like I think Ed Dutton's an atheist. Like, they're definitely scientific materialists. But then there's also scientific materialists on the other side that use evopsych in a totally different manner to say that, well, and this was very popular polemic back in the day. I remember reading Democratic Underground forum posts in 2006 about this, about how, people that are conservative or whatever, they're like, they're less evolutionarily adapt because they're not, outgroup friendly, and they're not going to evolve to a higher state because their frontal cortex is overloaded with threat response or whatever.
Yeah,
Even though like all of those things are anathema nowadays, right? But I think like there is no like there is no unified movement now. I mean, I could be wrong. There still is a lot of like new atheists around, but it seems like they've been swallowed, like everything else. They've been swallowed by the culture war, and yeah, like like atheism after Gamergate and after the 2010s is much different. Is that what the video talked about, Prude, or what are the videos?
No. It was literally just a comic thing. Like, it was a comedy bit, is what it was. Which is why, because I don't really watch YouTube for comedy purposes or anything like that. I just thought it was really interesting that, like, I'm watching this guy play out this bit about how he was embarrassed to be an atheist, or like he wasn't as cringe as they say we were, or whatever. Which is respectable. Like, no one wants to be, no one whose position is ideological wants to be seen as like, oh, I was such an idiot back then, or whatever, like,
yeah.
And that's fair. But at the same time, it was like, but it was played for laughs. But I'm also like, anything that gets played for laughs really is sort of this undercurrent for what things used to be, or what is on their mind, culturally speaking. And that's an important thing to consider out of all these things. It's like, oh, okay, like, you used to really believe in that, or you used to act that way. In the same way everyone kind of makes fun of like Reddit atheists.
Yeah.
No one wants to be the guy that says, I am enlightened by my own intelligence, or jokingly
be Al Lewis.
Yeah, no one wants to be that guy. No one wants to make fun of, like, no one wants to be the guy saying God's not real at a funeral for a child or whatever. Like, no one wants to be that guy. Yeah. And so I think that things have definitely changed culturally, at least for that, because there has been this like religious resurgence. But even then, it's not what it used to be in regards to, I don't know how well that'll apply for everything, because I guarantee you that there will be some edgy shit that you and I may have joked about, and you'll definitely receive the benefit of deleting your tweets in a way that I probably won't, just because it's like, oh, like, we thought this was funny back then, and we didn't think anything of it. So I don't know, like, all this is, and I think that you're right, but I also think that like the 90s ended when we invaded Iraq, and the 2000s ended when we elected Trump, and so we're still coming out of the 2010s, and I don't know what the latest trend is going to be in a couple of years. I have no idea, and it'll be really interesting to find out.
Maybe it'll be like Weimar, where it'll be like actual communists versus actual fascists. Who knows? It'll be like Weimar Germany. But there's a
a little terrifying if we get to that point.
Yeah. But there's a great question by Marbley. Was it not the Iraq War was the casus belli psyop? Well, no. Okay, I think that's an interesting question in terms.
Well, we invaded Afghanistan in 2001, and then we had to build up this international coalition of partners for the invasion.
But I think like the new atheist thing, the global war on terror, is a very interesting thing, because a good majority of them, they definitely did see a resurgence of like religious fanaticism, but I think they were sort of getting only like a mainstream version of what the Bush administration was really trying to do. They were only getting like, they took Bush for his word for it. They took Bush at his word for it, that he was conducting a semi-religious crusade against Islam on the part of, Western civilization, which is largely correlated to Christendom. But as the Obama years came on, and as Bush even abandoned that in his second term, I think that they sort of selectively ignored it as to why the American empire was going into the Middle East, why it had been interfering with the Middle East even before GWAT, during the 1990s, if you remember Osama bin Laden's letter to America. Definitely there were a lot of instances of fulfilling certain foreign policy goals. Not to say that bin Laden was right. I'm not, no, of course, like I'm not saying bin Laden there was a justification for anything. I'm just saying that, one thing bin Laden does get wrong, for example, is he blames Chechnya on the Americans when there's evidence to suggest that they were actually, former mujahideen that were being trained by Western intelligence agencies, involved in the Chechen war against Russia because Putin had gone AWOL. But by and large, I think the new atheists, a lot of them viewed that as, okay, we're in the 21st century. This is, look, this is why we need to get rid of religion. It's easy if you try, right?
Well, I mean, that was Hitchens's argument.
Yeah.
He would go on TV. He's like, listen, religion is dying in the West, and we've liberalized, we've become enlightened. He basically did we hate us for our freedoms, but from like an atheist left-wing position.
But as GWAT went on, though, and as the Christian narrative petered off because the culture had shifted in America, notice how people like Christopher Hitchens and like Pat Condell, they said, well, we don't like Christianity. We hate these people, these country bumpkins, these evangelicals. We've been demonizing them since the 1980s, actually longer. We've been demonizing them for so many years. But it's like, oh, but Islam is way worse. And so we're going to go after Islam. And actually, the global war on terror is good. Not to say I'm not going to put words in Pat Condell's mouth because I don't know I wasn't paying attention that much back in the day, but like I watched his video. I used to watch his videos just as opposition research because I generally did hate these new atheist people. But Christopher Hitchens no doubt was a supporter of the global war on terror because they saw an Islamic world as way worse than anything Christianity could have produced because they figured, well, Christianity was already a beaten dog that we conquered in the West. And so maybe if Islam could go down that same route. And there was this one follower of mine that said that from talking to people in places like Iran and Turkey, that perhaps the Islamic world will go through a period of dramatic secularization while Muslims in Europe will still be a very proselytizing form of religion, which I don't know about that. Like certain people, I think they may overstate the level of secularization in places like Iran, but I definitely think that there could potentially be a dramatic, like, quiet revolution or like what happened in Ireland with the Catholic Church level of mass secularization if certain geopolitical problems are exacerbated in the region. But I wouldn't want to count that because that's very, not to be all like post-colonial leftist, but it definitely is like a Western-centric view of things. I don't think that secularization operates quite the same way as it would in Europe or North America. But there is something to be, see, Sean mentions in the chat, there is something to be said about the jihad versus McWorld thesis. And a lot of the new atheists, they banked on McWorld by saying that, well, maybe jihad is good because if there's less Muslims in the... Like, I think Christopher Hitchens actually came out and said, he's like, well, if there's less Muslims in the world that have power, then that's a good thing. And so, not to say like I condone radical Islam or whatever, obviously, but I think that the new atheists definitely did have a dilemma back in the day. And I think nowadays it's obviously different because you still have the same thing, after October 7th. You still have the same thing in the Middle East with Iran, but it seems different. It seems like as there definitely still is an ethno and religious component to these conflicts in the Middle East, it seems that rhetorically it's not really about that because the political horizons of both the left and right in North America in particular have sort of like gone past what it was in the 2000s when the new atheists essentially controlled the internet. So it's almost like it's not really framed as a religious war. It's more framed so as like either, Western colonialism or some kind of like whatever, but definitely like I don't know, like you don't. I mean, they're still around, but the new atheists, I don't see them. They've had to go to exist. They've had to graft themselves onto like different things. Like there definitely were a lot of new atheists who were basically just like implicit neocons. Some of them were libertarians, obviously. Like the libertarian movement in America always had atheists in it. But then I think, as people like, the whole like libertarian to alt-right thing, that happened. A lot of those new atheists then became like, not maybe alt-righters, but they certainly became like anti-SJWs. But I think on the political left, they've had to like curb their message, especially against Islam, because Islam is taken up as now an identity issue rather than explicitly a religious issue.
Well,
So
it's
it's almost
because it got
yeah,
framed because it coincided perfectly because you had
yeah,
the migration wave that came after the Syrian civil war.
yes,
And so
exactly.
it stopped being a political issue about like the threat or the boogeyman of radical Islamic terrorism. No, it just became, oh, this is clearly a race issue or an ethnic issue or
Yeah,
an identity issue that no one wants to touch because that's still the most forbidden third rail in Western politics
yeah.
is that one issue. And it's not like we're going to see that go away anytime soon. I
Mhm.
don't think it will. I could be wrong. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't see it happening, you
There
know.
are people that predicted a resurgence of new atheism. I don't think. Now, I could just be coping. I could just be coping. But
It'll come back.
Yeah.
It'll come back. Eventually this weird Christianity, as Tara Isabella Burton had once called it,
Mhm.
it'll go away. It won't be what we thought it was. It won't be
Yeah.
forever. Um
Oh my God! Look at this comment by FBI informant. Didn't realize Kandal was an atheist. Used to listen to him for 15 years. 15 years ago, just ranted about how bad Muslims were. You didn't realize. Okay, Pat Kandal was interesting because he was a comedian, but he like kind of failed as a comedian. But then like he was a new atheist, but unlike other new atheists, he was willing to go after Islam. And so he made that his thing. He's like, here's the new atheist that hates Islam rather than just hates Christianity. Like he would say things about Christianity as well. Like, but then I think he realized, like, to especially in Britain, like, Islam was the greater threat than Christianity. So it's like, people didn't realize he was a new atheist. But no, the new atheism, I think, will probably maybe have a little resurgence, but I don't see them fully coming back the way they were, because you have to realize that even though a lot of these people were like frankly hypocrites and really didn't believe in what they were saying, they especially in the Republican Party, they thought they were just like pulling the wool over the eyes of people. But I mean, they definitely were people like, I'm not going to accuse like Pat Robertson or Jerry Falwell of not believing what they believed, but I think that at least the way it was preached about and the way it was coded in the mainstream media and in Hollywood and so forth, the Christian moral majority and the evangelical movement in America that was tied to the Republican Party was basically a mainstream cultural force. Now, Prude, could you say the same about like very online Catholics, trad caths, rad trads, and very online Orthodox people, Ortho bros? They don't have the same level. I mean, you could make some constrained
you
argument
don't
that
have the
like,
same kind of culture that had
right.
back then.
Yeah, like you would
America
say like
is
maybe
far
JD
more
Vance and trad cast,
well,
but that's
it's
about
far
it.
more deracinated. It's far more we're all online. There is nothing else but
Right.
just to focus on what's on the internet. Um,
Yeah. I mean, you
you
could say
know.
like, I don't know, they could say like, oh, JD Vance is a tradcath and he appeals to like tradcath gripers, but that's not true because of course gripers hate JD Vance. So it's like they don't have the same mainstream power that the evangelicals did. And the evangelicals actually didn't have that much mainstream power, but at least the way that they were coded within American life as such. I mean, even as a Canadian, I could see it from the outside. I mean, in Canada, of course, we were technically a Protestant country besides Quebec, but I think that religion did not play into daily life the way it did in America. The only way it played into my life was because I went to Catholic school, but that was about it. But no, but I mean, no, trad caths and ortho bros and like other like neo pagans like that are on the political right, like
It
it's
doesn't
not.
have the same
No,
political sway that it does. Oddly, I think it's in part a lot of that I think has to do with COVID. I mean, like, yeah, there's still like Christian conservatism, and let's obviously not forget that evangelical white Americans have been. I mean, this is why Stephen Wolf calls them like the lone bulwark. It's like
mhm,
they have been single-handedly like a big part of why America's voting has never been so left wing as we've seen in other quote unquote Christian European countries. Like,
Right.
there is something to say about like the Protestant white American in that regard, and we should never denigrate those people, regardless
No,
of
of
you and I
course.
having a different religious background. Unfortunately, I think they get taken for a ride sometimes due to either bad political leaders or bad theology saying X, Y, and Z should do this,
Right.
whether it's dispensationalism or other things. However, they're right on like 99% of all issues, and I'm going to vote with them on 99% of all issues every single time because that's just how it
Yeah.
works. But you are right. Like the
No,
Christian,
evangelicals in America, they were abused by their own leaders. I mean, let's be real, by their own
well,
political
that's that
leaders. Yeah.
and most American evangelicals will agree with you.
Yeah.
And so, but my point is that like, okay, we're this is where we're at. It's not as overtly Christian, and a lot of it has to do with Donald Trump as well being the president or being the avatar of the Republican Party, because Christian conservative Republicans are not represented anymore, and the
Right.
closest you have, he got his sinecure. He's the ambassador to Israel. Like that's Mike Huckabee. There is no real big Christian conservative. And I mean, you can say JD Vance, and I would agree with you because I mean, JD Vance brought up Catholic doctrine. He's
Yeah.
brought up stuff before. He's met with the Pope. I mean, he didn't kiss the papal ring, as far as I know. I mean, it's because he's the vice president. But like, it does go to show like this is where you're at. We don't have the same degree of influence we are. However, there is sort of, I think, since COVID onward, there has been this sort of great awakening in America. It has been a
Mhm.
right wing great awakening where, oh, maybe atheism was not the way to go. We should find religion. Americans were exposed to death for the first time in a long time in a sense that felt very real. Say what you will about COVID and the coof and the rest of that. For the average American, hearing things about people dying all the time or having a loved one or an elderly person on a ventilator or whatever scared the living shit out of them.
Mhm.
For me, it wasn't so much COVID that scared me, and I'm just as much part of these generation of people. Like 2020 for me was like, oh, my kidneys failed. Like I should get right with my creator, and lo and behold, it's been an interesting journey since. But for a lot of people, it became like, oh, I should probably find a place where there's community. And I mean, ecclesia being a community or a body or a church, to borrow crib from the Greek there, like there you are, like, and that's where it is. And of course, it became the easiest target. And for you guys in Canada, it was the only safe and socially acceptable target where dozens of churches were burnt down, hundreds of, Catholic faithful, clergy, and the rest were all targeted, and your
Mhm.
government endorsed it, and if not
Yep.
outright subsidized it.
Mhm.
So I think for a lot of people, it just became this non-political thing because American politics kind of stopped being religious in the Christian sense. And God was only ever invoked in vain by those who don't believe in him and prefer to mock him, which is tragic. But of course, that
Mhm.
is a long story in the history of the Christian religion.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it goes from there. I mean, I think will we get a more religious leader in the future? Maybe if JD Vance secures the nomination and wins the presidency, then yeah, he'll be the third Catholic president of the United States that may or may not actually follow and abide by Catholic social teachings, unlike the other two. um, I think it's safe to say that Kennedy and Biden were not really practicing Catholics in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, could you say Pierre or Justin were practicing Catholics? That's
I
probably.
didn't know. I didn't know that they had a religious affiliation at all.
Well, I think coming from Quebec, they had to identify with Catholicism, but
Oh, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. I don't think like Trudeau believes in anything. I don't know. I don't
He's a
think Mark
chameleon
Carney
that
believes
way.
in anything. I don't know. How is LDS doing that? Apparently, Mormons had a big revival during Clonvid as well.
Just about every group has had
Yeah.
a huge revival or a huge attraction into.
Well, even on the left, there's like I think the sort of rebirth of new religious movements in terms of like, but of course it's all framed as an identity issue, obviously. But like a lot of spiritualities of the alternative variety, I think, have also,
Oh, there's been a huge uptick in
especially with
just.
Zoomers, yeah, on TikTok, and
Um,
yeah.
I've been following this. I follow some market sales and stuff like that, like the amount of people purchasing things that are kind of like what you would call Wiccan or tarot or burning
Hmm.
sage has gotten really popular. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really
Yeah.
surprised.
Look at Hazel. I don't think Trudeau believes in anything. Hey guys, I think the sky is blue.
So true, King. So true.
Yeah, it's so true. Um, But anyways, let's move on to Virilio.
No, yeah, we should probably get that article up and running. We've been oh my god, almost 2 hours. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's been a good 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'll defend that. I'll defend that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
We covered a lot of ground.
yeah, we've got a lot to cover. So let me go pull up the slides here, and bam, or the PDF. It's always fun. Barnes and Noble is basically a pagan store. You can buy your idols either as Funko Pops, anime figurines, or the front page is all that weird Wiccan tarot shit. Although it's really funny because like maybe it's just a byproduct of where I live, which is still in like this part of the Bible Belt or like the edge of it in Texas, where it's just like there's all that weird pagan Wiccan shit at the front. But then like there's like 3 aisles worth of like religious devotionals, different translations of the Bible, religious Christian fiction, books on the saints. So it's like this weird mix because it's so funny because I went to Barnes and Noble one time, and this was like maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. I bought Jeremy Carl's book, The Unprotected Class, and I bought a different translation of The City of God by St. Augustine. And I'm usually out and about. I'm usually well dressed. I'm usually in something that looks kind of business casual. It's most of my wardrobe, and I had my cross out most of the time because I always do. I always have it out, and I'm getting my books checked out by this like morbidly obese 6'2", built like fresh from the Subaru dealership kind of lesbian. And she gave me this like very quizzical look as she looked, because I had a copy of Jeremy Carl's book, St. Augustine City of God. I think it was a publication from ISI because a friend of mine wrote a piece in it and he wanted me to read it. And so she just looked at me like I was the devil. And I looked at her equally like, well, aren't you a strange creature? You know, we had this weird moment of just like, oh yeah, we're totally different human beings in this regard. So yeah, Barnes and Noble's a strange place to say the least, but they do have a pretty good selection of Bibles. That's for sure.
They have Emperor Julian Funko Pop.
Not yet. I'm not surprised that there isn't a Julian the Apostate Funko Pop. But I think this is where we left off.
Yeah, Jericho.
No, Holy Inquisition.
Oh yeah, let's down. Yeah. I think we didn't get to Herman Nitsch yet. Yeah.
Oh well.
Oh no, okay, go up. Yeah, we didn't get the photo finish yet.
Yeah. Right here.
So.
Or one more. Oh yeah, the World of Bodies. We talked about this because I went to one of those shows.
Yeah.
Those were, I'm not gonna lie, it was really cool. Kind of morbid. I didn't think about it as a morbid thing as a teenager, but it was really cool to see all of these embalmed on display bodies, and showing athleticism, showing the nervous system, your circulatory system, your all these things, and then just to be like, behold a man, and it is a skinless, lifeless, featherless human biped of just muscle and sinew and organs that had been preserved for us to gawk at the dead. And it is kind of strange to consider all that, like here I am sort of, I don't want to say I'm mocking the dead or anything, but there's this spectacle about it that isn't holy, but it's not sacrilege either. It's this like third thing. I mean, it's very educational. It was done tastefully so. And it was particularly interesting just to see how it all looked. The World of Bodies Museum. Yeah. 200 human corpses. I don't know how many corpses I had saw, but it was quite a few, probably like 80 or so. But yeah, it was really cool. I would love to go back and definitely check that out. But
I think what you have to understand about a pitiless art is that I think maybe perhaps it's different in 2025 than it was in 1995 or in 2005. But certainly his whole argument is that the contemporary art world essentially had to go in the direction of what experimental science was obsessing with, in terms of the limitations of corporeality and the limitations of human qua nature, or human qua human at large. And so contemporary art largely had to conform to that same form of blood and guts, and also, virtual experimentation of the human form. There was a lot of great artists in the 1990s that did this. I forget this one woman, her name. Maybe he mentions this here, but I remember going into a bookstore and finding an art book of a lot of her different experimentations of the human body. I forget her name. I'm gonna totally blank out. But this was like peak 1990s contemporary art, and so But I think the same reality is still here today, only it's not so much contemporary artists obsessing over I mean, they still do this, but it's not. I mean, again, politics has really taken over the contemporary art world, but it's not so much them sort of like doing these. And they still do these, very mock occult rituals, and they still, have this sort of thesis around prosthesis and body modification. But now I notice with contemporary art, it's become virtual. It's become digital. It's now no longer the sort of one-to-one exploration of physical biological science and the contemporary art. Now it's Silicon Valley funding, or rather Silicon Valley obsessing over pushing the boundaries of the human, and the contemporary artist is faced with a world where now it's not Herman Nitsch, getting like models and e-girls to like bathe in pig's blood. Now it's something from the late 90s to the early 2000s onwards. Now it becomes virtualized, and he's writing about this on the cusp of the digital turn in the contemporary art world, when very much contemporary art during the 80s and 90s was still like Marina Abramovic doing spirit cooking and Herman Nitsch, splashing people with cow's blood and so on and so forth. And Staltech hanging himself like a fetish artist with body hooks and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that it's definitely become more virtualized as time has gone on. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the contemporary art world had to respond to Silicon Valley. And my friend Petra Courtwright talks about this because she's combines physical landscape painting with the digital medium. And so she very much is a luminary of like what they call post-internet art in the early 2000s, post-internet art in the early 2000s. But I think as time goes on, I think that I don't know, maybe artists just don't want to bathe in pig's blood anymore. I think they just want to they want to have like a QR codes where you like scan your phone and there's like a digital NFT statue. I know Sanford Biggers did this thing when he did the Chimera series where he had the huge like graffiti style head on the Greek temple and the Rockefeller Center. If you remember, me and Matthew the Stout did like a 3-hour video on the Chimera head. He in that exhibit you could go up to it and you could scan with your phone a QR code that would reveal some kind of like digital statue NFT. And so I think it's much less sexy, I think, than Marina Abramovic, bathing Lady Gaga in pig's blood. So anyways, let's move on. That's what a rant. I can't believe I just said those words. But
so true. So true.
yeah.
I think you are right, though, where there's the sense that the patronage network has changed. So we're not really responding to the science or the optimism of the day, but also it's also like you said, that it is the Silicon Valley thing. Like there is this unique interwoven expression where is the culture right now? Well, it's about technology and it's about politics, because all questions have been fundamentally reduced down to, is this something that I can make mass marketable and consumable, or is this something that I can make as potentially introspective to the question about my own existence? Because all politics at this point has been reduced down to existential questions, whether it's the panicking of the left saying that enforcing our immigration laws is fascism, or the very open, we will replace you, Michelle Goldberg, New York Times kind of writing. And so I think for the art world, it's the same thing. Like you guys are having to respond to the questions of what does it mean to express oneself in a completely deracinated state without at the same time tapping into the spiritual. And all these Silicon Valley types have become performance pieces in and of themselves. Like the greatest, he's not by trade a performance artist, but I think Brian Johnson is the greatest performance artist alive.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that he does to his body is impressive. And I look at it more so as this weird postmodern interpretation of Dr. Faust than I do anything else.
Well, I think
we will defeat death. Well, death has already been defeated, Brian. You're just trying to find a way to cheat God. Which is fitting, because I know Mephistopheles gets mentioned in like 2 pages.
Brian Johnson trying to cheat death. No, but there definitely is, like, you're pointing out the existential anxieties of the political left. But I think in the political right, there's also an expression of existential anxiety that and ennui that doesn't really get put into the work of art, unfortunately, because of the lack of artistic institutions and cultural institutions that are coded towards the political right. But it definitely does come out in posting. It definitely does come out in a lot of the sort of content and meme culture that is sort of like a worriment over not just the future, the state of Western civilization. So I think like everybody in general does have a sort of new digital version of the fin de siècle, the sickness of the century. And I don't think that's a very controversial statement to say that there is sort of like a new sickness of our century, and it gets expressed in different ways. And I think the sort of like hair-raising immediacy by which the contemporary art world has embraced activist politics, even though those activist politics are very muddled, they're combined with corporate interests, they don't come out very well. It all just goes to show you that there is definitely something going on there, and it is sort of like, how is the contemporary art world, even just besides the politics, like we were mentioning Byung-Chul Han's idea of this digital swarm, right? How do they navigate the world of endless information? How do they navigate the world of AI? How do they navigate even just cataloging and commenting on the state of affairs of a fundamentally different, liquid modernity type of world or hypermodernity type of world? And so I think that Virilio, Boris Groys, even Byung-Chul Han, they've all sort of tried to ask this question of how does the art world respond to the world that we live in now, which is something that I think is a different question than asking contemporary artists in the 20th century how they responded to events of the 20th century, because that had a very clear distinction. It's very clear what the German expressionists were trying to depict in the work of art, because it was there at every moment. It was very sensual to them. But the world that we live in nowadays is not very direct in terms of the machinations of everyday life on the individual subject. And so contemporary art becomes very difficult in terms of how to depict or how to comment or how to even ameliorate a lot of those machinations of everyday life in the 21st century. And I think a lot of people that were trying to get in early on this sort of like art on the internet thing, they realized that, I'm actually reading for a Content Minded episode, this book by Boris Groys called In the Flow, where he talks about art on the internet age and how they didn't anticipate the lack of framing of what the artwork could be or was framed as when you essentially destroy the, traditional institutions of art dissemination for online posting, where now all artists become content creators. And so I think even that, let alone the political or the social implications of art on the internet, that really did fundamentally change how we view things. And I think the artist is sort of taken aback in terms of legitimacy of how to navigate ordinary life. Whereas in the 20th century was sort of like, I don't want to like be pessimistic and blackpilling and say it was the last kick at the can for artists to have a form of like social legitimacy or relevancy. But it does seem like the contemporary art world is in a huge crisis, to say the least. And a lot of this is, how do we, the sort of like older vision of people, of artists in the 70s and 80s and 90s, like Nam June Paik, where the internet was something glorious. It could connect humanity. It was amazing. Let's embrace it. It's like, as Virilio was going to say, that reality isn't true anymore.
The triumph of liberalism is over.
Yeah, exactly. The triumph of digital liberalism is over. Now, digital pessimism is, it's here to stay. So,
there's no
global transnational pessimism.
No reason to not be a pessimist.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, the confrontation with the other has, across the globe, has led to more pessimism and not less. Like you were saying last week about McLuhan's Global Village. It's the same, so anyways, let's
a great deal of people, like I said, like a great deal of people misreading this item, this text, and it's just like, okay, great, we're here now and we all know each other, and as it comes to show, everyone's different. The great disillusion of any sort of like, we're all going to come together, we're all going to sing Kumbaya, we're all going to become McDonald's eating liberals, No, clearly not. Because turns out one group of people runs the motel industry, well, one group of people runs this, and you're left to just say this is all so fine and dandy when we can all look at our latest tweets about stopping Asian Pacific Islander hate, but we have to casually ignore that every time the New York Police Department has a video of the perpetrator, we can't say who they are without getting in trouble. It's
it seems that every group of people around the globe, when they do enter sort of a lot of people have the thesis that we live in Western postmodern and whatever, people drop their facticity of life at the door and they embrace something else. When in reality, I think that everybody being cast into the same mold in any multicultural society, like you were saying, everybody has to look for a different racket or a different hustle because it's a matter of survival. And so it seems like to divvy up resources instead of truly embracing some kind of not to say that cross-cultural diffusion does not happen, but definitely the wider political and cultural considerations have made it so that it's very hard to navigate in a world that does not, that is sort of so fundamentally changed by the various machinations of globalization and communication throughout the globe. And, I think that as time goes on, it becomes very difficult to even express that in the work of art. I mean, a lot of people have tried, but then you have to realize, I wrote this article. I mentioned, what was his name? Carlos Morales. It was I think it was either 2016 or 2017. I forget. It was the Turner Prize where all four of them, or was his name Carlos Morello? I forget. All four of them won the Turner Prize. And one of them was this multimedia artist. He did these statues about these straw and coal, there was the bits of straw and coal and clothing that filled these scarecrow type figures, and they were all in bus terminals or airport, mock airport terminals. And it was a comment about the migratory experience, the migrant experience in the UK. That's where, because I think he was from Colombia, he immigrated to the UK. But my argument was that, even though, of course, this guy is he's a leftist and pro globalization and, pro open borders, whatever, it still is a deep commentary on the nature of globalization in terms of the, in terms of global populations, existing in sort of a nowhere land. And even though he may have more of a leftist message, it still served as a very powerful art piece, in my opinion, to where I think that people that gave him the Turner Prize certainly would not have a reactionary, quote unquote, interpretation of that. But nevertheless, you could read something into it. Of course, I understand media literacy, authorial intention, whatever, but there is something to be said of a lot of this type of contemporary art that comes from, people that are part of migrant populations within Western countries. And it's, I think that, I mean, obviously they're not thinking about the political implications of that, but it's the same here with sort of what Virilio is saying. What happens when the contemporary art world embraces biological science, Silicon Valley? It is like a Faustian bargain. And what does that say about the work of art representing on a very deep level the picture of the human? And even just not even just in terms of politics, but in terms of our own embodiment, right? So I think, so anyways, let's continue reading. I've ranted for too long. Oh boy.
Oh man.
He mentions Herman Nitsch here is Orgies Mystery Theater. What a name! What, I gotta give it to Herman Nitsch. Orgies Mysteries Theater. So yeah,
anything here that you want to go towards, or just start towards this as terminal art?
Mephistopheles, that spirit that denies all the place was. The painter brings his body with him first and foremost, wrote Paul Virilio, Paul Virilio was a very famous poet and art critic. In the course of the 1960s and 70s, the painters of the Wiener Action Muss or Vienna Actionism would follow this dictum to the letter, using their own bodies as the support surface of their art. Herman Nietzsche's orgies, mysteries, theaters, masses in which the sacrifices animals in a bloody and body ritual were followed by what no doubt takes the cake as the most extreme case of autodifa by, oh sorry, my camera's blocking it, by any artist. The story goes that Rudolf Schwarzkogler actually perished after a bout of oh my god, after a bout of a certain thing that he inflicted on himself during one of his performance pieces that took place without a single viewer in the hoi class between the artist and the video camera. This is terminal art. Scroll up, Prude. This used to be the BTR thing when I had a, when I was fatter. I used to have this angle for BTR because I thought it looked better. So requiring anything more than the showdown between a tortured body and an automatic camera to be accomplished. At the close of the 20th century was Stellark, the Australian adapted body art. The visual artist Schopenhauer wrote, the visual arts Schopenhauer wrote were, quote, the suspension of the pain of living. Of course, the suspension of the will. The work of art is the only thing, one of the only things that can accomplish the suspension of the will in Schopenhauer. If people have read Schopenhauer, would turn into a headlong rush towards pain and death for individuals who have gradually developed the unconsidered habit of leaving their bodies not so much to science as to some sort of clinical voyeurism. Harkening back to the heyday of certain Angel of Death, if you know the Slayer lyric, who perform experiments we all know about in the certain place in Poland, for a time becoming the biggest genetic laboratory in the world. Immediacy is a fraud, Father Dietrich Bonhoeffer declared before disappearing in the camp at Flossenburg in 1945, while art is every bit as much of a fraud as amnesiac immediacy. If everything is ruled by lighting, as Heraclitus suggested, if everything is ruled by lightning, as Heraclitus suggested, the photo finish imposes the instantaneity of its violence on all the various artistic representations in modern art, like war and blitzkrieg. It's no more any kind of exhibitionism that imposed its own terrorist voyeurism, that of death lives. So he's saying
or
that
death live.
Yeah, that of death live. So of course he mentions, if you remember back in the 80s and 90s, you remember the Faces of Death series that people, I mean, half of them were fake. But you had the Faces of Death series. You had a lot of sort of morbidity, and the fact that an artist could film his own snuff film is
John Allen Schwartz.
Yeah. What's sort of I remember Robert Hughes talked about what was his name? He shot himself. That one artist. Oh boy, he had a pretty crazy name. I remember. Let me see. Artist that shot himself. What was his name? Artist shot. Chris Burden. Chris Burden. Not Jay Burden. Not related to Jay Burden. Chris Burden.
There you go.
Well, do you think Jay Burden could be a widely renowned performance artist?
No.
Yeah, Chris Burden, he actually shot himself. I think he lived, though. He only shot himself in the shoulder or something like that. But yeah, Chris Burden. I remember there was a pretty spicy, I think it was either Rolling Stone or it was Time Magazine. Robert Hughes wrote about Chris Burden. It was a very good article. So what do you think of that? What do you think of the Herman Nietzsche? I don't know. It's yeah. It's a lot to take in, but
it is, but also at the same time, to go back a slide here, right? Well, art is everything as bit of much of fraud as an amnesiac immediacy. The instantaneity of violence, artistic representations of modern art. I mean, I don't know how to read the last sentence, death live or death live. And I think it's death live because of the photo finish and everything that you get to see. I mean, there is something about us being able to instantaneously capture anything that is quite shocking and also very horrifying, because seeing anything up close and personal is going to fundamentally change your perspective of anything. Let's remember not too long ago, even before film and with early daguerreotypes, like we were photographing and we were live corresponding battles of the American Civil War, to which we did it once at Bull Run, and then we were like, no more of that shit, because it was gory, it was bloody, it was awful, and it wasn't this theatrical spectacle that we thought it was going to be, where the boys are going to have a good old-fashioned shootout, and then we're going to be done, and this is over. No, it was the start of something much more worse. And it's the same thing with war coverage in Vietnam, and it's the same thing of what we see now with GoPros and what's happening in Syria and other parts of the world. You can watch violence and get people get killed instantly. What is the greatest example of this photo finish imposition of violence than any video that you will see being flown by a loitering munition drone in Ukraine?
Yeah.
There is nothing more horrifying.
Drone that went into the BTR, and
yeah.
Well,
like one hits it to immobilize it, and then one hits the crew as they try and get out and evacuate.
Yeah.
And it ends photo finish on some guy's face.
Yeah, no modern artist could ever do that. That's
No. The suspension of the pain of living. Thank you, Schopenhauer. The suspension of the pain of knowing that it could be you. And that's what we do. Every time we see one of those videos, we go, thank God that's not me.
Yeah.
Because nothing is more horrifying than watch a guy cross himself before he gets blown up into smithereens.
What was the philosopher or critic? Was it Zizek? Or who was it that said like 9/11 was one of the greatest like acts of contemporary art?
I think it was feel like that could be a Zizek quote, but I don't know.
Or was it Baudrillard?
Probably Baudrillard.
Oh, it was Baudrillard.
That's more of Baudrillard's alley.
Yeah, it was Baudrillard in the terrorism essay where he said like 9/11 was an aesthetic. Yeah, I mean, he didn't mean it like he wasn't condoning it, obviously. Like only morons read that. But like he was saying that like in terms of terrorism as a global spectacle in the internet age, like 9/11 was like the sort of capstone of what a spectacle truly could look like. And so that's why he called 9/11 an aesthetic act. And there's other like, there's that book about well, maybe I should mention the mass ritual book, but like he got a lot of crap for that. I mean, obviously, right? Because this was like, he wrote this in I think 2003. But I think what he meant was that, like what Virilio was saying, is that, well, the tragedy of it is part of the spectacle. And the artist in the contemporary art world, because they've sort of, and what Virilio was saying is that because they have abandoned the body and because they've abandoned human nature, and they've abandoned nature qua nature as a greater spiritual force, the contemporary artist is left with the world of the spectacle. And so therefore, like, the contemporary artist has to like bathe in pig's blood or shoot themselves or, try to like do some like weirdo digital ritual like Marina Abramovic where, you get a bunch of audience members to like sleep on a cot in the middle of the gallery while they have headphones on and a blind where they're listening to Marina Abramovic say some speech or whatever. Like the contemporary artist is left with trying to mimic the real rather than engaging something that lies beyond the real. And so, I mean, what's there left to do but like, Herman Nitsch or Marina Abramovic, or not to say I'm bashing these people, but I'm just saying that there obviously is a conscious reason why the contemporary artist has to fling themselves into something else, because there's that fundamental anxiety over if you've fundamentally given up not just representation of the natural world, but even abstract expressionism had a form of nature that, even like Jackson Pollock, because he was a Jungian, he was saying he was tapping into his own unconscious, whether you want to believe him or not, that's, different. But I think that because the artist has forsaken something very fundamental to nature as such, therefore they have to like do these like weirdo spectacles where they're like doing like mock rituals, or they're like staging their own sunsetting, or they get a bunch of e-girls to bathe in pig's blood. I don't know, maybe the next Salt Lit meeting they could have, or like Elena Velez where you get e-girls to dance in mud or whatever. I'm not bashing Elena Velez, by the way. I'm cool with Elena Velez, but I'm just saying, like, that's like, you get e-girls in the fashion show where they're bathing in mud, and it's anyways, let's move on. Elena Velez is a very sweet person. She's very, I like Elena Velez, but e-girls dancing in mud. So, Why didn't I think about? I'm pissed off because why didn't I think about that, Prude?
Why didn't you reinvent Girls Gone Wild mud wrestling? I don't know.
Yeah, but like it's a it's like a primal scream type of thing. They're like going back. They're like returning to the primitive. Like the like it's a Camille Paglia speaks of this. Anyways,
help me.
Let's move on.
In Egypt, at the dawn of Western history, people forced themselves to drag the deceased out of anonymity and into the public eye as an image in order to identify the essential being. In Cambodia, at the going down of a pitiless century, the photographic identity of a detainee was filed before they were put to death. In the twinkling of an eye, we have, on the one hand, the birth of the portrait in all its humility and its discretion. On the other, systematic use of the freeze frame as a death sentence revealing the look of death. The two versions of an art that French artist Christian Boltanski tried to pull off, and according to his own lights, in order to fend off forgetting negation, this aesthetic of disappearance that, alas, provides a cover for those who still, even now, reject the impiety of art. It is better to be an object of desire than pity, they say. Once the province of advertising, this adage surely now belongs to the realm of art, the desire to consume yielding to the desire to rape or kill. If this really is the case, the academicism of horror will have triumphed, the profane art of modernity bowing down before the sacred art of conformism, its primacy, a conformism that always spawns an ordinary everyday fascism. Might disagree with Virilio there at the end, unless you want to call our current state fascism. Then I would agree with him, however, that profane has bowed down to conformism.
Yeah,
art is far more conforming than it is today, and even the attempts to be profane to conformity usually comes out as very kitschy or gauche.
Well, he still is of the French New Left, so
of course.
Yeah. So, how can we feel the mark of modernism being? So here's a good point. How can we fail to see the mark of modernism has been concealing the most classical academicism, that of an endlessly reproduced standardization of opinion, the duplication of bad feelings, identically reproducing the duplication of the good feelings of the official art of yore? How can we ultimately fail to twig that the apparent impiety of contemporary art is only ever the inverted image of sacred art? The reversal of the creator's initial question, why is there something instead of nothing? So he's saying, like, he's very similar to what Baudrillard was saying in After the Orgy, in that, like, you've transgressed everything, but you're actually transgressing to the point where you still hold what is classical and sacred art to be, like, a force that must be transgressed against. I say Gio because I want him to know I'm yelling his name. When in actuality, it is transgression that has become very standardized and plain. Mid-women mud wrestling.
I'm going to tweet that one, Haziel. Thank you. That's a good one.
No, but so he's saying, like, the contemporary world with their transgression, which is actually, I know it's like a common point, but it is it is true, especially nowadays, that, like, the academicism of the contemporary art world is transgression. It is a very, like, stale image of what transgression is. It's like, okay, you've destroyed sacred art. What is there left? Oh, but actually you have to keep destroying it, and you have to, like, pretend it still is a, cultural force. And so, yeah. Finally, just like the mass media, which no longer peddled anything other than obscenity and fear to satisfy the ratings, contemporary nihilism exposes the drama of an aesthetic. Remember, he wrote a whole book, The Aesthetics of Disappearance, which is about information society, and Byung-Chul Han cites it many times. The drama of an aesthetics of disappearance that scroll up, Prude.
Yep. Hold on.
That no longer involves the domain of representation exclusively, political, artistic, and so on, but our whole vision of the world. Visions of every kind of excess, starting with advertising outrages that ensure the sous de scandale, without which the conditioning of appearances would immediately stop being effective. Now, does not Virilio basically predict slop posting on the internet? It just, here one day, burns out next. We're going to talk about Poor Man from Virginia. What was that song called, Prude?
Richmond, North of Richmond.
Exactly. We're going to talk about that one week. We're going to talk about the chubby ginger e-girl the next week. We're going to talk about
I missed a chubby ginger e-girl this week. I feel like I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, but we're going to talk about like this controversy and that. Like, in other words, you know, the work of art becoming this form of spectacle has a very quick burnout rate, and it just essentially it's a massification of production itself. So when he's saying that the contemporary artwork is almost like a form of advertising, it's like we all remember certain advertising campaigns that are better than others, but most of them are just like, a cheap forced meme nowadays that is like maybe a few years out of date, or it's ginning up some type of controversy. Notice how like there's no such thing as like guerrilla marketing anymore. I wonder if like Isaac Simpson's talked about this. There's no such thing as guerrilla marketing anymore. I mean, yes, there is. Like, there could be a company that will like create some kind of controversy, or like the only thing I could think of was like the Wendy's anime girl, or like Steakums posting like Reddit nonsense, the official Steakums account, or like, but really there's no like mass guerrilla marketing campaign, because it's almost like we've become very desensitized to that form of spectacle. It's like nowadays, like if you really want to gin up advertising, you have to basically go to the internet and post a bunch of memes or post a bunch of controversial statements, and it's like it just doesn't mean anything. It's not very clever. It's like, even though it pretends to be clever, it's just the burnout rate is incredible. Like I can't. The last thing I could really think of that did it well was that oat milk, that Oatly company that was like, they would like go to war with Riot Nationalist on Twitter, and actually this oat slop is good, and we love being stereotypical soy jack whatever. But that's like stupid. That's like, I don't know. It's just it's not even clever anymore. It's not even maybe I'm just being too cantankerous. But anyways, it's just.
I should clip that and put that on a soundboard forever. Maybe I'm just being too cantankerous.
Like these companies, it's like it's so easy to gin up controversy. Like it's just go out there and I don't know, like
silence brand. Yeah, no, it's easy. I mean, it's almost it's expected. Everyone's kind of like, oh boy, another Twitter account for a major brand has a gimmick. I can't wait to see how fast we mentally break this man. Like that's what I think about. It's like I think about how easy it was to and I mean, like, it's for right-wing Twitter, it's a really good example. Like, the guys behind Hestia cigarettes, like, how fast did one of those guys break when he was like, wait a minute, you're telling me you're not going to buy my, like, tobacco product because, like, I'm of a certain ethnicity? And, like, all their replies were like, yes. And then, like, with Wassoon Watch, they're just like, well, we're going to take that scene from Inglourious Bastards, so we let people know that if you're, like, quote-unquote doing this, you're not one of us. And, like,
we're the only person, not too edgy.
But also, like, again, I will say this.
It's like the metal water company, what's it called? It's like water in a can, but it's like for like Reddit.
Liquid Death.
Liquid Death has like the Redact Billionaires can. It's like, woo!
We're safe edgy. You can buy my Redact Billionaires can at Walmart. And I'm like, little bro sold out. Unk sold out. It's okay. Unk. You gotta get the bill.
We're cool. We're like, Wasson.
We're so cool. Posting, but not that. And then you look into their personal lives, and they're like these like edgy, like kind of like borderline Satanists, and you're just like, this explains everything. And it's what we were just reading. It's about the sacred art of conformity. Like, whoa, we support Luigi, but oh my gosh, don't you dare delist my product from the Sam Walton Corporation.
I support Luigi.
So what I was gonna say, Gio, was like the only person I think that didn't walk away totally buck broken and mind, assaulted was the Oatly guy. I think he's the only one that still kept his psycho security up. And so I know he will never listen to this or watch the show, but to the Oatly guy, you held up better than Wassoon. You held up better than the Steakums guy. You held up better than Liquid Death. You held up better than Will Stancil, you held up better than Evan Loves Worf. You held up better than that onion trans person.
Better than Garbage Ape. Garbage Ape hasn't tweeted in a year.
You've done, yeah. You've held up. Hey, Oatly guy, you're doing better than Swan Marcus. Remember that guy? You didn't take a walk. You kept fighting at the replies.
I hated that Steakums guy. That was so obnoxious. Where he was like talking about like life doesn't mean anything, man, but you just gotta like make the best of it, and like that's why you gotta buy Steakums. It's like, okay, you're laying on the most pap existentialism imaginable, like literally, like not even like it's not even like Reddit existentialism. It's like it's like 9gag existentialism, and you're gonna be at the end of it. It's always
funny, like, nothing ever matters.
Yeah, and at the end it's like buy Steakums. Apparently, Steakums is trash, from what I've heard.
I don't think I've ever had a Steakums product in my life.
There was the few food YouTuber.
So now that I mentioned that, hold on, I'm now going on Twitter. That's a terrible thing. Alligator deporting turtle. Oh, that was a funny little video. What was I gonna literally look up? Oh yeah, Steak and Shake. Because they had like that weird fashy aesthetic for like 2 seconds.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. They had they're
how many followers? 410,000 followers, and average tweet gets about 20,000 impressions or so. Orange pill turned into an orange shake. Cheers. Hold on, I'm now Googling where is the nearest Steak and Shake near me. I'm not sharing screen for obvious reasons because I don't want to get doxxed. It's like over an hour away. I'm good. No thanks. But clearly they've marketed themselves to chuds, and I wonder how well that pays off for them.
Yeah.
But I find this funny. Hold on. Is my message?
Maybe Steak and Shake, they realized that Beardson Beardley used to work there when he was a kid.
But like, look at this. Hold on. Share screen. Look at this real quick. Steak and Shake. Eat more beef tallow. Like.
Oh my god.
With the chicken. I get it. We're clearly doing the famous for the steak burger, the home of the original steak burger.
Like, here's the thing, bro. Here's the thing about us at DA. We're not gonna cop for any type of slop just because politically we may agree with it. It's like slop is.
I find it endearing, but I also am like, I'm not driving an hour for a fucking burger.
Listen to me. I'll tell you one thing right now. If you're gonna, here's one I did. I did this a few weeks ago at a lake near my house. If you're gonna buy this painting, right, this little plein air study, or what's the better one?
I'm waiting.
What's a good one?
We're waiting.
We're waiting.
We're waiting.
Here's a drawing I did.
Okay.
Of a mountain range.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Or you know what? Yeah, let me just stick to my original thing, the plein air study. Listen, are you going to buy this because you like it, or are you going to buy it because I'm based in Red Pill and I'm a frog? Think about this for a minute, right? Because I know certain people would like to think that, like I market myself in a certain way or whatever. Fine, okay, fair criticism. But I've always said from day one, okay, if you like this, buy it because you like it. Don't buy it because I'm like, whatever. I'm like a frog, okay? Like, I wouldn't be like, you're going to save Western civilization because you bought my plein air study. Like, no. It doesn't, like, I would, like, okay, I know, like, when it comes to podcasting, I make jokes like, you're buying war bonds in the InfoWars. Like, because, that's like old school Alex Jones, right? But, like, I wouldn't claim to be like, give me money because I'm saving Western civilization. Give me money because I'm saving Canada. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. You just open yourself up as a target by doing that, by both sides, really, because first you're going to like frustrate people that do support you by selling them a grift. And secondly, you're going to like make yourself a target by saying that, if you buy something from me, you're really going to be based in Red Pill. Like, it's just, oh man, it's not.
There's a
buy
difference between
things
buying
that
a
are
product
good.
to virtue signal versus buying a product to
Yeah.
because you actually like the product. The only product I've ever bought where I was like, I'm only doing this because it's going away and I like the guy, was when Sargon announced the Lotus Eaters, and he's like, so all my Sargon of Akkad t-shirts, they're going away. They'll never be made again. And I was like, I'll take 2, please.
Yeah.
But I think it's the only time I've ever bought merch with like a semi-ironic tongue-in-cheek. I've bought stuff from friends before. I've bought Matthew the Stoat's art before.
Yeah.
I have one of his charcoal sketch drawings of Christ crucified in my living room right now. I gave the other one of an angel away as a present. I don't remember to who. But yeah, like when it comes to artists, especially, at least for me, like my money should always go towards, am I doing this because I like them or I feel bad for them, or am I doing this because I find the work speaks to me? And if the work speaks to you, that's all that matters. Not because, oh, I feel bad for this guy, or oh, he's a fellow chud. Like, I see friend, I help friend, but hopefully in a way where my friend's work gets better.
Yeah.
Like if you have a crappy story, like a crappy novel, I'll read it. I may not give you the best feedback or the most positive review, but I want you to do better. You know,
I will get back to Virilio. But what, I'll make one qualifier with you, okay? I've showed this on stream before. I have the skin of it. I did this plein air of the schoolhouse that I went to when I was a kid. It was a field trip, and we had to like pretend and LARP as this class that they had on the wall from the 1800s, and like we had like different characters. I was like one of my friends. I was like his brother in this headcanon, right? And so I did this, and it took me like pretty, a while, like. But to me, when I do plein air painting, it's because I think that it's local to where I live. Sometimes not, but like, it's local. It's what Canadian artists have been doing for decades upon decades. It's an expression of who you are as a person in terms of where you come from. And there is a greater cultural, I would say even spiritual awareness of, me as a Canadian, right? But I wouldn't like, I wouldn't like bullshit you by saying that, like, buy this 100%, like even people that do this, the whole like elbows up, like support Canadian products, like you're not fucking going to defeat Donald Trump by, sorry, pardon my French, but like you're not going to destroy American political power because you bought Canadian maple syrup or whatever, or you chose Canadian draft. Equally, you are buying, I think, if you buy a plein air painting from me or another Canadian artist, that is an integral piece to what Canada is. It is a form of localism. It is a form of engagement with the natural world that makes us as a nation distinct. But that being said, I'm not going to be like, buy my plein air studies because that's saving Canada and that's going to lead to political transformation. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. Like, buy it because you like it. Buy it because it's something that is integral to the experience of what Canada is from the Group of Seven on. Even before the Group of Seven, there's painters like William Blair Bruce that were from Hamilton that my father enjoyed when he was a little kid, that I enjoyed when I was a little kid. And I like to think that if I could, even in a very small way, participate in the tradition of Canadian art, then that, that is what it is. And plein air painting is very integral to Canadian art. But I'm not going to bullshit you by saying that buying a plein air piece from me is going to save Canada. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not, I just don't have the heart to be like, I'm using beef tallow in my steak, buy my cigarette, buy my chip brand, buy my watch company because we're going to save the Western world. It's just, if a quality product is a quality product, then fine. But I guess I shouldn't be as cynical because a lot of people on the political left, they basically use activism as a selling point. But I mean, even people on the political left view through that and say like, well, that's just crass cynical marketing, because it is, like you're not, when you go to Starbucks, you buy Starbucks because you like Starbucks, not because they support trans rights or support Planned Parenthood. I mean, of course, that's part of it, but we all know why you're going to Starbucks. I mean, maybe some people can delude themselves into thinking that by choosing Starbucks over Dunkin' Donuts that you're supporting Planned Parenthood, but it's like, just be real. Like, it's like what Zizek said, morality, morality is in the product, like I know it's a common point, but it's the truth, and so I'm not going to be here and be like, well, buy my painting because it's like, I'm a base guy. It's like, yes, you can commission me to make me a painting. We'll have to talk about it, but I just like Prude. I went on that rant because I'm so tired of this type of like very stupid political marketing, and like, a lot of people, like a lot of like,
it's so flash in the pan.
Yeah, like Daily Wire, those evangelical film companies where it's like, you gotta support God's Not Dead because we're like base Christians, fundamentalists. It's like,
but the movie sucks.
But the movie sucked. Like,
it's so bad.
I'm sure Hestia Cigarettes is good, but I'm just saying, like, get your Gio slop survival bucket. Maybe one day when I open up a hot dog stand, I'll give out the.
Have you seen the opening to Twin Peaks: The Return?
No, I haven't. I gotta see.
So I mean, this is the sequel series, revival, whatever. And so it starts off with Dr. Jacoby, for those who remember, and he's kind of turned into Alex Jones, and he's selling these golden spray painted shovels, and he's like filming himself. He's like, you gotta dig your way out of the shit with my with this gold, and it's so good. It's so good because it's so fitting for what Dr. Jacoby would become. But like, I just think about that for like all sort of like political products or whatever. It's like, gotta shovel your way out of the shit with my golden spray painted shovel, and it does a little action with it, and it's just funny. But like, I think about that with a lot of political advertising. Gotta shovel the shit. Gotta be based. Gotta be trad. Gotta be cool. And it's just like, no, you really don't. You just need to make a good product.
Yeah. Oh, are you still sponsored by Elf Pouch or no?
Yes, but I mean, they changed things, but I really don't want to. I mean, the money is whatever. If you want your tobacco from that way, by all means you can. The link's down below in the description. But I just don't press it for obvious reasons, i.e. because I don't want to do the whole warning, hey, this is a tobacco product that has been found by the Surgeons General to be addictive. So I just put it down below in the link so I don't get fucked over.
But go to Pure Objects, run by Mike and Paul, for all Gio merch. So Pure Objects.
You can get your DA merch down below at my Teespring store.
Oh yeah. We should migrate DA merch to Pure Objects too. I mean, we could help out a friend,
Yeah, I'll talk to Mike about it.
All right. Yeah. PureObjects.net. For all your based and red pill needs. No, I'm kidding. It's actually, Mike Paul is a great designer and digital artist. No, I definitely will wear the fez while I was, I like making that New York style onion sauce. It's amazing. It's incredible. I have a good recipe. So, maybe one day when I'm thoroughly canceled, no, I'm kidding. I'm gonna listen, man. Listen, I've always maintained, like, I'm just a theory cell. I'm just an artist. And it's like, if you like my work, you like it. I mean, I don't like to claim I'm any part of group or whatever, but like, it's just, I've only done what I can. And, I mean, we all make mistakes along the way. We all maybe, when we're younger, we choose to affiliate people we shouldn't have, but whatever. It's like, all you can do is move forward. And I remember, I'll tell you one thing before we move on, Prude. There was a comment someone gave to me on my Patreon. It was the Cezanne episode. He's like, this is why I give Gio money. Not the coal, not the e-girl stuff, not the drama, just like pure content about the art, the work of art. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's like, I like to think DA, we do that as well. I mean, yeah, we have our fun and games. We have our political hot takes, but I think, to me, this stuff is more meaningful than any, like, even when the political hot takes, I think we did a pretty good job with the Elon thing. I think, but what are you going to do? Anyways, let's move on. Yeah. Oh boy. Really.
Apparently they're supposed to give an announcement for Grok version 4 tomorrow. But that'll be fun because apparently Grok today called itself Mecha Hitler. So, it'll be a very Wolfenstein themed announcement tomorrow. That'll be fun. Good.
Actually, skip this page, Prude. I think the one after this one's pretty interesting. But he does say procreation between human and transhuman has been close, just as those New Age disciples had hoped, and the celebrated British review, The Lancet, can arrogate it to itself the exorbitant right to remove the term inhuman from our vocabulary. So now he's talking about eugenics. Sir Francis Galton, the unredeemed eugenicist, back in the land of his cousin Darwin. Freedom of aesthetic expression now knows no bounds. Not only is everything from now on possible, it is inevitable. Thanks to the genetic bomb, the science of our biology has become a major art, only an extreme art. So again, this harkens back to his thesis of the genetic Hiroshima. But I have to say though, I think perhaps, I mean, you know, given that Peter Thiel interview, that's definitely still is a thing about, like, you know, a lot of Silicon Valley people being transfixed by, you know, this transhumanist idea of the human person. But I think in the early 2000s, when he was writing this, you had like Dolly the sheep, and you had like the first iteration of cloning and gene modification. And so I think that he was responding to his time. And I think that even though nowadays people still talk about it, it seems that like a 20 years on or more, um, we don't necessarily live in like a cyberpunk world. We do kind of like people, you know, kind of experiment with like getting QR code tattoos or like putting chips in their arms or whatever. But that just seems like, I don't know, like, seems kind of like too baroque. It seems like just putting people in a VR headset is like the way to go. Like, it's even like Silicon Valley transhumanists have gotten lazy about it. You know, it's like reorientating the human body is too much work. You might as well just like suck people into the soma of a VR headset. It's like, there you go, you know? So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of it too, because I mean, this is going back. He's relating Mengele down to eugenics to today about transhumanism, and for me, it's reading this. It's very interesting how, like, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. There's not so much the artist that interrogates these things anymore, but it is the fact that we're at such a point where it really is just it's just the guy with money.
Yeah.
It's not for art. For him, it's not for the artistic expression. It's not for nature. It's not for anything other than to overcome it. It serves as a purpose. It's not for art or art's sake.
Yeah.
You know, so now we're supposed to break the being, as he says down here. Having broken the taboos of suffocating bourgeois culture, we are now supposed to break the being, the unicity of humankind, through the impending explosion of a genetic bomb that will be to biology what the atom bomb was to physics. You don't make literature out of warm and fuzzy feelings, they say, and they're probably right, but how far do we go in the opposite direction? As far as snuff literature, in which the conformism of abjection innovates the academicism of horror and official art of macabre entertainment. The United States, take one example, the torturing of the human body with sharp instruments was seen to have been for the preferred image of advertising, according to the Wall Street Journal on the 4th of May 2000. Hit over the head by such media bludgeoning, the art lover is surely already the victim of what psychiatrists call impaired judgment, which is the first step in the accelerated process of derealization, contemporary art accepting the escalation in extremism and therefore in insignificance, with significance going the way of the heroic nature of old-fashioned official art, obscenity now exceeding all bounds with snuff movies and death live. Let's turn now to the contemporary theater and dance, in particular the work of the choreographer Meg Stewart. Since the 1990s, Stewart has been taking her stage performance to the limit. In Disfigured Study, 1991, the dancer's skin looked like it was straining to contain a body in the process of dislocating itself in a brutal vision of automatic self-mutilation. Devastated bodies seemed like so many panicky signs of a live spectacle in which the catastrophic intensity condenses a terrifying serenity at the edge of an abyss. As you could read in the press apropos Stewart's most recent work, Appetite, conceived within the installation artist Anne Hamilton. In a work like this, everything is dance involving bodies without hands, twisted legs, and wavering identity expressing who knows what self-hatred. After the Snuff video, we now have the Snuff dance, the dance of death in the slaughterhouse of modernity. And then, of course, the famous Adorno quote about poetry after Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, Stewart is actually pretty. Those dances are actually pretty hypnotic. Like, I highly recommend watching some of those videos. But it was very much like a 1990s thing. Like, a lot of contemporary artists, like there still is like a lot of body art, but it seems like you know, Virilio, if anything, he was correct that the body would slowly disappear from the art world as well, which is very. I forget who in the chat asked me if I watch Instagram art critics. There's this one Instagram art critic that I quite enjoy, but I think like he's wrong about certain things, even though I do still listen to him and I respect his opinion. He's like, well, there's no point to doing portraiture, doing like figure studies anymore, or like, putting the body in art. But I'm thinking like, that's kind of not true, because the human body is an eternal form. And I think that as much as I agree with a lot of, contemporary art is valid or whatever, I still think that the body is a place. But I think what Virilio is saying is that artists like Stellark or Anne Hamilton, they've so like integrated the human body with something else, not in like a sort of like ritualistic spiritual engagement, the way that the artwork in the Cave of Glastos is like doing it, right? Like in that Werner Herzog documentary, Cave of Forgotten Dreams. It's not really ritual. It's not really animistic, if you will. It's more so that you were trying to escape the body by embracing prosthesis, embracing transhumanism, embracing a sort of like mutilation of the body, like Stellark doing a suspension. I remember, it's he would like wave in the air with like the body hooks, and there was actually a Combat Zone wrestling angle where Zandig got suspended on body hooks that one time. It was very controversial, and if anyone remembers that. But you could write. I could write a theory cell essay about Stellark suspending himself and John Zandig doing a wrestling angle where he suspends himself on meat hooks. So yeah, I could definitely write that essay. But here he goes with Adorno. But it has become politically incorrect to say so, all in the name of freedom of expression, a freedom of the freedom of the contemporary. With the terrorist politics, Goebbels described as the art of making possible what seems impossible. But let's dispel any doubt we might still have. Despite the current negationism, negation, freedom of expression has at least one limit: the call to murder and torture. Remember Media of Hate in the ex-Yugoslavia of Slobodan Milosevic? Remember the Thousand Hill Radio of the Great Lake region of Africa called Rwandans to intra-ethnic genocide, Radio into Hamwe. Confronted by such expressionist events, surely we can see what comes next, looming over us as it is, an officially terrorist act, preaching sunsetting and self-mutilation, thereby extending the current infatuation with scarring and piercing, or else random slaughter, the coming of a thanatophilia that would revive the now forgotten fascist slogan, Viva la Muerta. Well, see, again, I would say, again, you have to realize that Virilio is coming at this from the new left perspective. Now, definitely you could, let's be fair here. You could say that, there is something that Walter Benjamin talked about with fascism, that it doesn't give you freedom, but it gives you expression, right, politically and even aesthetically. But I would say that what he could not have anticipated, and I covered this in my essay, Abortion is Normal, if you remember years ago, Prude.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Virilio could have anticipated that the same thanatophilia would manifest itself in the contemporary left, like there definitely is, I think, a tension. We see this nowadays between like secular fascistic vitalism, which I think is what in keeping with what Virilio is talking about here, with obsessions of eugenics and HPD and all that, and like the return tradition religious trad, which is about, combined with sort of the ecological awareness that was always in, especially, for example, North American Catholicism with the Back to the Land movement, for example. I know certain people, we know certain people, like, well, we were right, for example. But I think that what he did not anticipate was that the political left in the art world was also going to, embrace a form of death obsession and real sort of like transgressive body modification and so forth. That I don't think that, Virilio, I don't think that if you would have come back to life and you were to have written this essay in 2025, I think that what he's talking about strays political lines. Even transhumanism. There's like the right-wing tech bro, the Peter Thiel version of transhumanism, and there's like the Ray Kurzweil leftist version of transhumanism, or like the real, Silicon Valley optimism version of transhumanism that I don't think could easily be fit into like the Peter Thiel, Elon Musk version. You know what I mean? So I think that I definitely want to recognize that Virilio is still a man of the political left, and I would never want to put words in his mouth. But I think analyzing this text is very interesting because I think that you could definitely see a lot of these trends across political lines and across cultural lines. And so I think it's very important to examine works like this and to sort of like let your mind rest from just like always trying to fit things in your particular political category, cultural category. And so I think that, he's definitely signaling the alarm. But at the same time, lastly, I would say that along with Byung-Chul Han and other social critics of this ilk, right? They do have this like weirdo, like boomerish conservatism, not like political conservatism, but they're very skeptical of things. Like even Byung-Chul Han is very much like sort of curmudgeon core when it comes to the information society. And I think like he's got a lot of like, unfortunately, he does have like a lot of boomer criticisms of like, well, people are obsessed with their smartphones, which people are obsessed with their smartphones, but I think like it's not something you could turn off, So it comes off as very curmudgeon core in a weird way. It's very stuffy, but yeah.
Hmm.
What do you think, Prude?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Thanatophilia. What a great term.
Yeah.
Outside of like, I guess, extreme art, is this genetic trance still a science or some new alchemy? I mean, that's the real question, right? Is this art? And I mean, I had said it earlier that Brian Johnson's a great performance artist, but I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like, what are we facing other than like to a point where we fetishize it? It's just this old critique about like, you're so obsessed with it, you must secretly like it. But I mean, we're so obsessed with it because it is the only certainty that we have on this earth. So I'm not so sure if it's like, oh, the coming of death. I'm so excited for it. I'm so ready. I embrace it. There's a thrill that comes with being near death, but I mean, not like there's a difference between like being an adrenaline junkie and doing shit to shock myself or to feel alive. Which at that point, is it really me being like, obsessed with death? Or is it just the high that I get knowing that I've skirted it and I've narrowly avoided it?
Yeah.
And so I guess the thanatophilia feels right. But I mean, everything, if that's the case, then all things that we do that are in defiance of death itself or our existence can be, I guess, categorized under this new kind of expression of self for artistic purposes. Like, is me taking my anti-rejection medication so I don't die of a terrible infection art? No. But I could see how when we look at it could be, I guess. I don't look at it that way. I view it as a necessity. But like, talking about genetic engineering, after locating a gene that seems to play a decisive role in the formation of a chicken's hind limbs, Logan and Tabin took a radical step of introducing the gene in the genome of a virus in which they injected into the developing embryo to test the function of the gene. The chicken's wing have undergone major transformations, now look like legs, with the wing twisted into a position suitable for walking and the fingers pivoting to facilitate pressure on the ground. The placement of the muscles is radically different too, better adapted to the specific functions of walking. But this monster is not yet perfect, however, for its Kafkaesque metamorphosis is incomplete. The four-legged chicken is in fact an experimental failure worthy of featuring in the bestiary of Jerome Bosch. After Dr. Strangeloves of the atom bomb, voila, Frankenstein, no less, the monsters become the chimerical horizon of the study of malformations. And it won't be long before human guinea pigs are used instead of animals in future experiments.
That's already happening.
That's already happened.
Yeah.
Both in the East and using, other various animals, not to mention the great scandal in South Korea in the early 2000s. I don't know. There's something here. There is something here. Denounce this drift of genetic expressionism. Wild.
Yeah, people really want this, it seems. That is one. I will play devil's advocate, though. Not that I'm a transhumanist, but I do find one argument compelling that I think even Peter Thiel talked about this in the interview with Ross Douthat. But I've heard this from other... I remember back in the BTR days, I used to debate that Gennady Stolarov. He mentioned this once. The one argument I find compelling for this type of life science and experimentation and genetic expressionism is they say that it's not so much, it's not natural, because humans have been, and you notice this in fiction, like either Frankenstein, or that essay, Darwin Among the Machines, or Dr. Strangelove, or even way before in antiquity, you do have this impulse of the human to break the confines of the res extensa, the extension of the human. And in fact, we've always, technics is as ancient as time itself, where we've always found ways to extend our greater capabilities in the natural world to the point where we've conquered the natural world. And so the transhumanist would say that it's not unnatural to do such a thing, that we've always been trying to modify our bodies to create greater capabilities in our environment. Now, that's true. I disagree with the extent to which there is a solid self system that, when you mess with it, there's all sorts of very scary consequences. And I think that it's a compelling argument, but it's not compelling to where I would say, yeah, let's all just genetically modify each other. Let's all just do that. I think it was someone said, I think it was My Fitness Feelings. He said the film Gattaca, that it wasn't so much against eugenics, but it was about like the human spirit equating the level of genetic modification. So in a way, it was like, it was, in terms of the media literacy interpretation, Gattaca definitely was preaching against like modification and eugenics, but it was more of like an average man overcoming his limitations, like by hook and by crook, obviously, to reach the level of genetic modification within himself. So it's a very powerful film in that way. But I know like the standard interpretation is that, it is like a, anti-experimentation film, but I don't know, like, what do you make of that argument, Prude? We definitely have been trying to modify ourselves. The second the early hominid, he forged a club, like in 2001, the monkeys, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, but anyways.
Well, I think that we're innately drawn, and our evolution has been drawn to be tool wielding.
Yeah.
I'm very much of man and technics on this one. It will come with tragic consequences, and we'll have to accept them and have to somehow overcome them. But the cat's out of the bag. It's never going to go away. This kind of research is inevitable, and the consequences to it, I don't know if you and I will truly live to see them or not. But I accept the fact that, while I think what they might be doing has consequences they don't realize, in the same way that Virilio writes about this in The Original Accident in a different book of his, it's like nuclear weapons. Like, the cat's out of the bag. Like, you can't just stop. People are going to keep going for it. So I understand the appeal. I do. Because no one wants to die unprepared, or no one wants to look at a situation and say that that's bullshit if they have the means to fix the problem. I don't think a genetic therapy or anything could fix me, but like, if it were to be out there to prevent someone else who had suffered from my condition to live, then by all means. But also, I think it becomes this weird thing where it's just like, well, oh, that's awful, but also, like, I take advantage of it, where it's like I am very intelligent, kind of like pointing out a subtle hypocrisy or something. But it's difficult because, on one hand, like, we are such a death avoidant society that we don't, there's no sacredness, there's no real profound understanding or respect for the dead either anymore in our life. Like, when's the last time you went to a funeral, Gio?
Maybe last year.
Okay. Was it open or closed casket?
I think it was closed.
Closed casket. Okay. So no, no visual for the dead or anything like that. And then it's just, there's still distance, and there's a nice photo. I just think, I think about that a lot. Like, we're so avoidant of it, despite the fact that we're all fighting the same thing over and over again. I was at my grandparents the other day, and my grandfather's getting up there in years. My grandmother's a little older than him, and she's definitely kind of come to terms that, she can't do what she used to do.
Yeah.
And she and I are walking along the pond, and she's telling me, she's basically asking me to go help them out around the house more often, which I told her I had no problem doing. And she goes, yeah, your grandfather is still in denial that he can, he can't do all these things like he used to in his condition or whatever. And it's just like, I guess I've just resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to die younger than most people because of my own condition. That I'm like, I'm concerned because any sort of like techno or transhumanist thing might have a lot of like biomedical security state implications for the future of what other ungodly horrors that may come, since COVID gave us precedent for so much. But at the same time, it's just like, I kind of accept the fact that I will die, and that's sort of okay and inevitable. And I think it just boils down to our own matter. I think it just boils down to faith at the end of the day about what your thoughts on death are. To me, it's inevitable. It's natural. I am dust, and dust I will return to. But don't cremate me. That's all I ask.
Yeah, that's true.
Do you is there anything else that you want to add here for Virilio?
He says much of the same, but just the next page.
Okay, and then we need to go to the super chats.
Yeah. So ethics. No, the other page.
Keep going.
Yeah, here we go. Ethics or aesthetics is indeed the question that dawns of the millennium. If freedom of scientific expression now actually has no more free limits than freedom of artistic expression, what will what does he say here? What will humanity end in future? After all the great periods of art, after the great schools, such as classical and the Baroque, after contemporary expressionism, we are now heading for the great transgenic art, in which every pharmacy, every laboratory will launch its own lifestyles, its own transhuman fashion, a chimerical explosion worthy of featuring in some form of salon of new realities, if not a museum of eugenic art. As one critic recently put it, artists have their bit in say about the laws of nature as the fin de siècle of the century. What is urgently required is to define new relationships between species, and there's not conceived in loaded terms of bestiality. It is not entirely irrelevant to the point out here that if extreme sports came before extreme sciences, there is a good reason for this. One that is to do with the cult of performance, of art for art's sake, the breaking of records of everything imaginable kind. So I think we should leave that here because he says much of the same in the next 2 pages, which is the end. No, I mean, deathmatch wrestling, let's have no rope, barbed wire, exploding barbed wire. Let's have light tubes. Let's have, suspending John Zandig on meat hooks. Let's have juiced up, mega athletes in the octagon. Let's go crazy, right? I think that maybe it might come in the future where like that scene in Existence where kids they like have like their memory ports in like mall kiosks. It's like that, right? Like he's saying that genetic artwork will be like tattoo culture nowadays. But I don't really I think he's kind of like I think the problem with Virilio here is that he's still caught up in the embodiment of it, but it's not that it's going to be embodied. It's going to be virtual. It's going to be in the swarm. It's going to be in the wild.
It was in the cloud. It wasn't in the genome.
Exactly. And so I think that he sort of like way overestimates the physical embodiment of it, but he's saying ethics or aesthetics. Like obviously, like
I mean, the only real expression that we have for like an actual in the body type of expressionism of this isn't so much as it is. I mean, in the far future, it might be genetic like editing and gene editing, but right now, instead, it is the macabre mutilations that come with, say, like transgenderism.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's the most obvious example, and I don't think, I mean, Paul would never really live to see the horrors that has come out of that. But I mean, the ethics or aesthetics. Well, you've got both. There's an ethical, quasi-religious. I mean, really, also just like plain old sexual fetishism that has now been like subsidized and entertained by various state governments across the world and across the country. To where now it's just like, what is more grotesque than to see a woman's like? If we're gonna look at this in the Virilio sense, like, name me a more grotesque thanatophilic performance art than a woman who had her breasts surgically removed and is smiling, showing off her top scars?
Mm-hmm.
Name me a more death-philic piece of expression. Or a person who is holding in a glass jar their testes, saying that they're now a woman. Give me one. Come on. Eat your heart out, Stuart.
Oh man, but
that guy's a better performance artist.
But that's the way I think. Like, even I've often debated this in the past, where there definitely is an aesthetic truth. I think within the last few centuries, there's been a sort of divorce of moral or ethical truth, theological truth, and aesthetics as such, like true beauty, the true, the beautiful, the good, so on and so forth. But I do think that there is also it sort of crosses political lines as well, because there's definitely a lot of people that would say, like, certain 20th century regimes of the political right, for example, were definitely the divorcing of ethical truth and aesthetic truth. But I think that, I don't think you can necessarily divorce aesthetic truth and moral, or you can't really separate the three: theological, moral, and ethical. Sorry, moral, ethical, theological, and aesthetic truth. But I do think that excuse me. I do think that aesthetic truth has a way of drifting from the other two, which can lead to great experimentation in the work of art. But I do think that there is something to be said about forsaking certain ethical truths for aesthetic truth. And I don't think it's as simple as just an identity issue. I think that there's something else going on. I mean, it's 3 hours. My mind is starting to turn to mush, but I do think that aesthetic truth can live on in the work of art in a way that even ethical truth cannot. Right? It's sort of like the whole obsession with media literacy. It's like authorial intention could be a form of moral comportment that whatever the author wants to place in the work of art, but the aesthetic truth of that piece will always live on past it. Right? And it could be anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be a left or right thing. But like you were saying, like, I think there's a natural connection between, I mean, natural is a funny word in this context, but there's a natural drift between framing body modification as an identity issue and framing it as an aesthetic expression. And I think that because contemporary political and cultural orthodoxies prevent even people on that side to question it, because to question it would be verboten, I think that in the future, these questions will become more muddled and confused, to where it's no longer just I'm changing my body because of an identity issue, because I feel a certain way about my ethical, progressive, political, and moral makeup. But now you extend it further out even more to an aesthetic truth, or rather, not an aesthetic truth, but rather an aesthetic expression. And I think this essay, as you pointed out, Prude, has a lot of very interesting implications from the view of 2025 as opposed to the year 2000. And I think that to sidestep these questions would be it wouldn't be a proper way of interrogating such a text. And I think a lot of people don't want to admit that it's rather the aesthetics that are at stake than the sort of moral political angle to transforming oneself. And I think that's a very uncomfortable question for a lot of people. And I mean, who knows, right? I mean, I think if we did live in existence world, right, like that film by Cronenberg, it's like, I mean, kids would go to a mall kiosk and they'd have like neon Ray-Bans in their skin or something. I don't know, but it goes beyond that, because it's like, it's no longer about changing one's body. But, and again, this goes back to Byung-Chul Han, right? Like, it's no longer about pure biopower of the ability to change one's self as it's embodied, but now you're talking about psychopower. Now you're talking about changing one's mind in a virtual phenopoly. So it's yeah, I think again, I think that if anything, the limitation of Virilio is that he still is stuck in the body. But who knows? Whether various activists and academics really want to answer that question, if there is a hard and fast distinction between what is aesthetic prosthesis and modification of the body as opposed to political, cultural, and identity transformation, as you mentioned, the certain issue with certain whatever. um I, that's a very uncomfortable question,
because I think there's probably a more
yeah,
definitive answer,
yes,
or at the very least a Justice Potter I know it when I see it kind of answer.
right,
You know,
right,
like a tattoo of like a Celtic knot is less political and more for aesthetic reasons than, say, I'm going to graft the skin from my forearm to make a fake penis.
right,
Right? Or I'm going to take HRT, or I'm going to boil a bag in this like ritualized art procession and akin to Frankenstein's laboratory than it is for the purposes of I'm showing how pollution affects my life or whatever. Instead
right.
it's what people would call Troonshine. And so
I'm
I think it
yeah,
just kind of boils. I think why do you want to avoid that question? Because you've already chosen a side. Like that's the thing. I think that kind of boils down to all of this is right. Like ethically speaking, this stuff is horrifying, but
mhm,
because or I'm on this side of like quote unquote like the right side of history or the moral position, just being a good person. There, just like with art or in any part of the art world, there's the question of patronage that comes down into the end. Because a patron at the end of the day is also going to be the one that sets the standard for culture
yeah,
because they have the money and they have the patronage and the power to do so. And so, yeah, there's probably a pretty relatively definable line that you can delineate these things from. The question then becomes, what do you do with it?
mhm,
Because to me, it's like, oh, well, a little uncomfortable question now, isn't it? Because the patrons of my day, whether it's subsidies, pharmaceutical companies, art, Hollywood, etc., all tell me that the body horror and by extension the genetic Hiroshima of plastics, of endocrine disruptors, everything that kind of fucks with our chemical biology as a human being,
mhm,
that is worthy to be sacrificed on the altar of this like utopia.
right, yeah,
And so, like, I do agree with you. Like, this is far more interesting to interrogate today than it probably was when this came out.
yeah. I wonder if there could be like one of these performance artists that they could catalog their experience of injecting themselves with like a horrific degree of microplastics. And like I wonder if like one of these like art in the Anthropocene type of performance artists, they would say like, this is what's happening to the natural world. So I'm going to catalog what the effects of injecting myself with incredible doses of microplastics is going to going to work upon my body. It's sort of like how nature's being besieged by plastics everywhere. I wonder if like some artists would be brave enough to do that. I wonder what that would be like. Um, there that's a total gem I've given to any contemporary performance artist right there. So
That's
but
an
yeah, I
option.
think yeah, but I think that's the thing because I mean a lot of people in the contemporary world, they sort of like, now that I think about it, they sort of like want to have their cake and eat it too. They're sort of like, whoa, no, 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 like you understand, like I'm serious about my progressive politics, right? I'm not gonna distort that. But it's like when it comes to my actual artwork, it's like let me have the freedom to experiment and like ignore the questions of what the aesthetics over the politics actually is. And it's sort of like you can't really, in this world, you can't really have your cake and eat it too. You can't be like, I'm just playing around as an artist, but then also like, I'm super serious about not destroying these pretensions towards like maximum political, right side of history utopia. It's just
Yeah.
like, like come on, man. Like it's just yeah, but what are you
Let's
gonna
be
do?
let's be more honest with ourselves at this point.
Yeah. Like there's artists that I think they do a sort of like cartography of their experimentations, and there's you know what I mean, but I think like nowadays I think what Virilio is saying, but he means it in a much different context with eugenics rather than like lifestyle politics. but you could like, cross the two, is that he's saying that in the other page over, he says for art's sake, right? If you really open up the floodgates towards this attitude of total permissiveness, both in science and art and culture, then it's like any chimeric monstrosity that comes after, it's sort of like, okay, fine, but what are you going to do about it, right? And so he's saying, like, if you have art that doesn't venerate nature, if you have science that doesn't venerate nature as such, then it's sort of over. It's kind of over. Like you're not going to go back, because once you've, as we've known, once you've broken one social taboo, it's very, very difficult for a society to regain a form of taboo in their culture, in their politics, in their beliefs individually, and it might take a lifetime before people collectively wake up. And you mentioned the trans thing, but like, you could say that about anything. You could say about microplastics. It will literally take multiple generations that maybe in the future will come up with some technology that can mimic the same ease and portability and storage capacity of plastics without actually affecting us. But then people will then say, oh, well, how could people view reality in such a way back then? My God, but it's like, well, what choice do we have? It's sort of like people that, but then again, I don't want to really lend it to like a totally tech determinist thing. Cause I remember there was this tweet by, I think it was, it may have been Nemitz, or it may have been like a more mainstream writer. It may have been like, one of these like people that talk about like HBD or whatever, but like was more mainstream. It may have been like, that libertarian, what's his name? I forget. It was an article about like, or was a tweet about, technology is just going to come and ameliorate certain problems, like Ozempic. He was using the example of Ozempic. Like the average normal person lacks, especially in the world of like post scarcity, quote unquote, although that's very temporary, as we know, and the sort of like world of abundance. It's like, it's very difficult to inscribe mass willpower to people. I mean, obesity is a very complicated issue. It's not just a matter of willpower; it's other factors as well. But as a whole, though, it's like, well, Ozempic will just solve that problem. It won't really, but like, it's sort of like, well,
it's the start of something.
Exactly. Yeah. The same way that I think if we came up with an alternative to plastics, that would be like, I think that generally would be a great feat of humanity. If we were to come up with an alternative to plastics that wouldn't damage the environment and wouldn't damage ourselves. But until that day comes, sorry, yeah, it was Nathan Kofness that said that. It was Nathan Kofness that said, well, Ozempic's just going to cure the problem. So I think that, yeah, it's one of those things where it's sort of like in the face of brute reality, more moral questions of like moral worth and authenticity get sidelined toward, you know what I mean, towards like something of like actual mechanical problem solving. But then again, I don't really I think that's a very like Silicon Valley tech determinist view that people have. I think that there should be something to be said about human will and human ingenuity and human capacity, rather than just saying, well, if technology can come and solve the problem, then that's fine. Because we all know that there's unintended consequences to anything. But yeah, I don't know. I put it this way: I'm skeptical of that argument of like tech determinism, as I've always said. But yeah, it is something to think about.
Well, it's certainly not going away either. I think that argument's going to persist because,
sure.
Let's face it. I mean, I think it's safe to say that we've yet to successfully adapt to a system where most people can stay pretty focused and disciplined.
Yeah.
And the things that are meant to help us are also our biggest distractions.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So, I think time will tell, but I think we have to wait until maybe Zoomers or Gen Alpha will probably give us the filtered experience. And what I mean by that is like, we're going to see who gets filtered and who doesn't. And we're going to kind of see the natural selection run its course. And I think that that'll probably answer a lot more of those questions. Because I do agree with you. I don't think tech determinism will solve all. but it will play a large role in what gets filtered and what doesn't.
Yeah. We need to wait 20 years for the 100-year-old Adam, 100-year-old Adam Curtis will do the, social critique documentary on Ozempic. We have to wait a little bit for that.
Yeah, maybe we'll see who makes it that long. But with that, it has been going on for well over 3 hours. I'm going to suggest that we head on over to the super chats then.
Mm-hmm.
You can head on over and send a super chat via the entropy link that is down below in the description, as well as the pinned comment in the chat, as well as via YouTube if you so wish. However, if you wish to be a long-term supporter of the show, get access to exclusive content, game streams, and the rest, head on over to subscribestar.com/the Prudentialist, as well as to patreon.com/giantartproductions. Links are down below in the description. And with that, I'm going to go to the super chats and round through this because I'm slowly losing my brain. So we'll start over with YouTube because I have my starred YouTube pages. Let's see here. Bloodbase just sends $9.99. Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Nice. Marbly says for £20. Well, thank you, sir.
£20? Yeah.
That's very kind of you, sir. It says, did you guys read the Rolling Stone anti-woke literary scene piece? Yes, and I would highly recommend that if you want the best breakdown on that article, please head on over to the Sidebar podcast hosted by Tukey's Mag over on the Tukey's Mag YouTube channel. Tukey, also known as David, Capitalissimo, and Gabe did a great breakdown. It was what I was listening to when I was door dashing this morning. Gio, do you follow Insta art critics like Taylor Morrison? Bonus question: have you ever watched Taylor Irvin's Scorned by Muses series?
I've heard of the Scorned by Muses series, but I think I've never watched it. I may be talking about the same guy, but I know that there is like a lot of art critics on Instagram that are quite interesting. There's this one guy, like he does this like point of view thing. I forget the guy's name. Let me see on my Instagram. What he always has like videos. Oh God, where is he? Oh yeah, here he is. Galandro, B. Galandro. No, sorry, that's the art he's critiquing. Let me go to We Open. Yeah, here we go.
I'm gonna move on while you look
That's
for
the
him.
guy. We Open.
Okay.
WE Open. Yeah, that guy. I follow him on Instagram, but yeah, I think I've heard of Taylor Morrison, but I definitely want to check out the Scorned by Muses series. I've heard of it before, but I mean, of course, like Brad Trommel was like the trailblazer in Instagram art critique. So yeah, but thank you, Marbly, for the super chat.
Moving on. Capitalissimo just sends $10 in this economy. So true. Big Ben just says Rip Frasier. So true. I'll probably, you know what? How many episodes are in the Frasier reboot or Frasier sequel?
Oh yeah, Marbly. Taylor Morrison is We Open. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I follow Taylor Morrison. Yeah, he's great. I don't agree with everything he says. Not even just like, not politically, but I mean, like, I disagree with him artistically in certain elements, certain aspects.
Oh, it did get canceled. Look at that. It died and it got canceled on Paramount Plus.
Wow, why?
Oh, well, because I'm sure it sucked.
It sucked, yeah.
How many? 20 episodes, 2 seasons. So I'm going to assume 10 episodes a season. I might make that a patron thing where I just like review that and then give my breakdown of every episode. That'll be fun. But so true, Big Ben, Rip Frasier. Jan sends $6.99 Canadian. He says, "Hi Gio, would you ever consider setting a discussion/debate between Nemitz and Fortissax on the future of Canada? I don't know who else to ask. Would be fire."
Maybe.
You and Dimes could probably make that work.
Yeah, I think like Blood Sally would probably be a better venue, but I mean, maybe. I mean, it could be involved, but I think like they're definitely. I mean, maybe Blood Sally would be a better debate panel for that. So, but I definitely would consider it. Yeah, I mean, I've had both of them on the show before, so yeah, that would be interesting debate. I know your friend does not like Fortissax, but that would be a very interesting debate. So,
it would be.
Yeah.
Gabe exists as a flower knight in a very Vanta Black dungeon bath. Oh, I really wish I should have read that whole thing before I put it on. Damn it, Tukey.
Oh,
Oh well. I'll live. Thanks for the tug, brother. Yeah, you're welcome, Tukey. Just thanks for ruining my comment section. Over on
Yeah, the
Entropy.
Tukey's Tuggers. Yeah.
Yeah, the top tuggers. Also, now that I know what Gabe looks like, you two are just your brothers. Gio, you two are brothers.
Yeah, we should.
Sam153 says Sneed. Haven't they canceled the new Frasier yet? No high hopes for a new King of the Hill either. Yeah, we were literally just talking about that. My roommate is really a big King of the Hill fan. Like, he can quote it, because like Arlen, Texas is very culturally similar to a place that he grew up in. As soon as I saw that thing where it was like Connie and like ethical non-monogamy, I was like, they're gonna make Bobby Hill a cock, aren't they? So I'll probably watch and give my report to you all. Reportedly, the U.S. spent $1 billion to fire 100 THAAD missiles over a couple of days during the Israel versus Iran conflict, while only making 60 a year. The U.S. military-industrial complex at its finest. Well, why do you think we ceased doing some shipments to Ukraine? We can't make shit right now. And that's with our Patriot missile system. It's nuts. Jay Ford just says 9 gags on Steakums. So true. So true. And then Charlie Mackey, very generous, says, good evening. I hope you are both well. Nice. We are both well. Things are looking up, I think, for both of us. So I really can't complain. And then check any more last minute super chats here. Nope, I think we're good. Well, this show went for 3.5 hours. Good for you guys. Gabe measures 16 hands at the Withers. Oh boy. All right. Well, we're going to be, I don't know what we're covering next week. I need to confirm with the guy about the Steins Gate stuff, if he had sent it over or not. Yeah. And then, if not, we'll do something next week. I'm sure there'll be plenty of news or an article will come up that we can cover. But we'll be live next week. I finally have my audio edited. The Halo episode drops this week. You're all welcome. And pray for me, because while that drops and premieres for you guys, I will be at a job interview. So hopefully all that will play out well. But we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, I'll try to come up with the content minded too. So yeah.
Alrighty.
God bless. Goodbye. Too sweet.
See you, gents.